I handed my daughter the keys to a brand new Mercedes for her 18th birthday. Instead of saying thank you, she raised her champagne glass in front of 100 guests and announced she wished I had never been her mother. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply walked up to the stage, took the keys back, and set into motion a legal avalanche that would leave her and her deadbeat father completely homeless in exactly 72 hours. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who underestimated your worth. My name is Jocelyn, 35 years old, and somehow still healing from wounds my own blood inflicted. As the founder and president of a commercial real estate investment firm in Chicago, I spent my entire adult life building an empire from absolutely nothing. I clawed my way out of poverty after getting pregnant at 17, working 3 jobs just to keep the heat on in a tiny studio apartment. I sacrificed my youth, my sleep, and my social life so my daughter Brittany would never have to know the feeling of an empty refrigerator or a past due eviction notice. I gave her the world. I paid for private schools, expensive tutors, and every luxury she ever pointed at. I thought I was protecting her. I did not realize I was funding my own villain origin story. The betrayal happened on a crisp Saturday evening at the Oak Brook Country Club. I had rented out the entire main ballroom for Brittany's 18th birthday. I paid the massive catering deposit, hired a live band, and arranged for a professional photographer to capture what was supposed to be a milestone celebration. The room was draped in gold and white silk crystal centerpieces reflecting the soft lighting. Waiters circulated with expensive appetizers, while 100 guests, mostly Brittany's wealthy friends and their parents, mingled and laughed. I stood in the back corner of the room, sipping sparkling water, feeling completely invisible at the party I had single-handedly financed. Up on the small stage at the front of the ballroom stood Brittany, wearing a designer gown that cost more than my first car. Standing right beside her, beaming like he had actually contributed something to her life, was Travis. Travis was my ex, the man who had bolted the moment I showed him a positive pregnancy test 18 years ago. He did not pay a dime of child support. He did not show up for birthdays, graduations, or hospital visits. He was a ghost until 2 years ago, when my company landed a massive commercial high-rise deal that made the local business news. Suddenly, Travis slithered back into town with a shiny new suit and an eager new wife named Vanessa. He rebranded himself as the fun dad, the guy who let Brittany break curfews, drink at parties, and ignore her responsibilities. He painted me as the controlling, workaholic monster who only cared about spreadsheets while he got to be her best friend. Vanessa, a woman who looked at my bank accounts with poorly disguised hunger, played the role of the cool stepmother perfectly. I watched Travis whisper something into Brittany's ear, making her giggle. Vanessa stood on Brittany's other side, resting a manicured hand affectionately on my daughter's shoulder. They looked like a picture-perfect family, completely erasing the woman standing in the shadows who had bled to give them that stage. Brittany tapped a silver spoon against her champagne flute. The sharp ringing sound cut through the chatter, and the ballroom grew quiet. Guests turned toward the stage, raising their own glasses in anticipation of a heartfelt birthday speech. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate my 18th birthday." Brittany began, her voice echoing through the sound system. "This year has been amazing, mostly because I finally get to be an adult and make my own choices." There was a ripple of polite applause. I took a step forward, a tight smile on my face, waiting for the obligatory thank you to the mother who had paid for the open bar and the imported caviar. Brittany's eyes scanned the room deliberately, passing right over me before settling affectionately on Travis and Vanessa. "I want to make a special toast to the 2 people who actually matter," she continued, her voice gaining a confident, theatrical edge. "Growing up is hard, especially when you are raised by someone who treats you like an inconvenient business transaction. I spent my whole life being controlled by a woman who just tries to buy my love with her real estate money." The air in the ballroom instantly turned to ice. Conversations died mid-sentence. I felt the collective gaze of 100 people shift awkwardly, searching the room for my reaction, My chest tightened, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. Brittany raised her glass higher, her smile sharp and cruel. "I wish you had never been my mother," she announced, projecting her voice so every single syllable reached the back of the room. "I spent 18 years suffocating under your rules, but I survived, and I am so grateful for my real family. To my dad Travis and to Vanessa. Thank you for showing me what unconditional love actually looks like. You guys are my true parents." Travis puffed out his chest, looking incredibly smug. Vanessa actually wiped a fake tear from her eye and hugged Brittany. The three of them stood there on the stage I paid for, basking in the glow of my public humiliation. A heavy, suffocating silence gripped the country club. No one clapped, no one cheered. The live band stood frozen, holding their instruments. Guests stared at the floor, absolutely horrified by the sheer brutality of what had just happened. They knew I had funded this entire event. They knew Travis was a deadbeat who had only recently shown up. But Brittany did not care about the truth. She only cared about wounding me as deeply as possible. If she wanted a reaction, if she wanted me to break down in tears, scream, or run out of the venue in shame, she was going to be severely disappointed. I had negotiated deals with the most ruthless commercial developers in the city. I did not intimidate easily. I set my sparkling water down on a passing waiter's tray with a quiet clink. I smoothed the lapels of my tailored blazer, squared my shoulders, and began walking toward the stage. The crowd literally parted for me, stepping aside as if I were a storm rolling in off the lake. I did not rush. I took measured, confident steps. I watched the smug satisfaction on Travis's face slowly morph into nervous anticipation as I approached the steps of the stage. Brittany lowered her champagne glass, her defiant smirk wavering just a fraction as she realized I was not running away. I stepped onto the platform, the wooden floorboards creaking slightly under my heels. I extended my right hand. I did not raise my voice or make a dramatic gesture. I simply held my palm open, staring directly into the eyes of the girl I had given up my youth to raise. Brittany frowned, her manicured fingers clutching the leather box that held the key fob to the Mercedes-AMG. She had been parading that key around all evening, making sure every teenager in the room knew she was leaving the party in a $100,000 sports car. "What are you doing?" Brittany scoffed, stepping back. Travis immediately puffed out his chest, stepping between us like a cheap bodyguard. He wore a rented tuxedo that fit too tightly around his shoulders. "Back off, Jocelyn," Travis warned, lowering his voice to a threatening growl meant only for the stage. "You are making a fool of yourself. Do not ruin the kid's night just because you cannot handle the truth." I did not even look at him. I kept my eyes locked on Brittany. "Hand it over," I said. Brittany scoffed loudly, glancing at Vanessa for support. "You cannot take my birthday present. Dad said it is mine." "Your dad has not bought you so much as a Happy Meal in 18 years. I replied, my voice carrying just enough for the front row to hear. "The car was purchased this morning. The keys are in your hand because I allowed it. Hand them over. Now." Vanessa placed a protective arm around Brittany. "You are being completely unreasonable, Jocelyn. This is exactly why she wants to live with us. You are a toxic narcissist who uses money to control people." I shifted my gaze to Vanessa, letting a cold, deadpan smile cross my face. "I am not using money to control her, Vanessa. I am using money to teach her a lesson about gravity." Before anyone could react, I reached forward and plucked the leather box right out of Brittany's hand. She gasped, too stunned to resist. I snapped the box shut, the sound echoing sharply through the microphone that Travis was still foolishly holding. "You want to be an adult," I said, turning my attention back to my daughter. "You want to claim that I bought your love and that these two strangers are your real family. Fine. If I am not your mother, then live as if you never had one." I turned my back on the stage and walked down the steps. The crowd parted again, but this time the silence was suffocating. I could hear Travis shouting my name, demanding I come back up there and act like a rational human being. I ignored him. I walked past the crystal centerpieces, past the imported caviar, and out the grand mahogany doors of the country club. The night air was crisp and biting, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the ballroom. I handed my ticket to the valet. He took one look at my face and ran to retrieve the vehicle. Less than a minute later, the sleek black Mercedes AMG pulled up to the curb, its engine purring with a low, menacing growl. I tipped the valet $100 bill, slid into the driver's seat, and pressed the accelerator. As I merged onto the highway heading back toward downtown Chicago, the dashboard display lit up. The Bluetooth system synced with my phone and notifications began pouring in like a digital avalanche. The screen flashed red with incoming texts. I tapped the display, allowing the system to read the messages aloud over the car speakers. "Message from Brittany," the automated voice announced. "Bring my car back or I am calling the cops. You cannot steal my property. Dad says he's calling his lawyer right now." I let out a short, humorless laugh. They honestly believed throwing a temper tantrum would force me to turn the car around. For 2 years, Travis had played the fun, rebellious father, indulging her worst impulses, while I played the strict working mother. He convinced her that consequences were just another one of my toxic control tactics. He was about to find out how corporate law actually worked. The phone rang. It was Travis. I let it go straight to voicemail, but the system automatically played his recorded message a minute later. His voice boomed through the pristine surround sound of the Mercedes. "You bitter, toxic woman," Travis yelled into the receiver. "Who the hell do you think you are? You embarrassed my daughter in front of her friends. You embarrassed my wife. Bring that car back to the club right now, or I am filing a police report for grand theft auto. I will have my lawyer destroy you. You cannot just take back a gifted asset because your fragile ego got hurt. Consider this your only warning." The voicemail ended with a sharp click. I reached out and turned the audio system completely off. The sudden silence inside the cabin was deafening, broken only by the hum of the engine and the friction of the tires against the asphalt. I did not shed a single tear. For 18 years, I had bent over backward to provide a life of luxury for a child who just publicly disowned me in favor of a deadbeat. I felt nothing but a profound, chilling clarity. The mother who would have cried over this betrayal died on that stage. The woman driving this car was the president of a commercial real estate empire. I pressed my foot down on the gas, watching the speedometer climb. I exited the highway and navigated the brightly lit streets of the financial district. I pulled into the underground parking garage of the JC Holdings corporate tower. The security guard at the gate waved me through, recognizing the license plate immediately. I parked the AMG in my reserved executive spot, grabbed my briefcase, and took the private elevator up to the top floor. The doors slid open to reveal the dark, silent expanse of my corporate office. City lights from the Chicago skyline spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the marble floors. I unlocked my private suite, tossed the Mercedes key fob onto my massive glass desk, and powered on my dual monitors. I pulled open the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, bypassing the standard operational contracts, and retrieved a thick red folder marked Personal Assets. I spread the documents across the illuminated surface of my desk. I poured myself a glass of scotch, sat back in my leather chair, and began preparing for war. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window of my executive suite and looked down at the street below. The neon glow of the streetlights illuminated the sidewalk where Travis and Brittany were emerging from the lobby doors. The two police officers followed closely behind them, ensuring they left the premises without causing any more trouble. Even from 30 stories up, I could see Travis waving his arms frantically, his posture oozing with unearned confidence. He was gesturing toward the glittering skyscrapers, pulling my daughter close to him, painting a picture of the luxurious life they were about to have. I knew exactly what he was telling her. I knew the exact lie he had been feeding her for the past 2 years to turn her against me. Travis firmly believed that the $2 million trust fund set to unlock on Brittany's 18th birthday was generational wealth. He had convinced Brittany that my late grandparents, who had owned a moderately successful hardware store decades ago, had left behind a massive secret fortune. He spun a narrative that I was a greedy, hoarding mother who was keeping Brittany away from her rightful inheritance just to control her. He played the victim perfectly, claiming he only stayed away from us for 18 years because I had supposedly used my family's wealth to intimidate him and push him out of the picture. It was a brilliant story. It made him look like a tragic hero and painted me as the corporate villain holding the purse strings. Brittany, eager for a father figure and tired of my strict rules, swallowed the lie completely. She looked at Travis as her savior, the man who was going to rescue her from my tyranny and help her spend her grandparents' millions. I turned away from the window and walked back to my desk. I picked up the heavy red folder containing the trust fund documentation and spread the thick parchment pages across the glass surface. I ran my fingers over the official seals and the signature I had penned so many years ago. Travis was a fool. My grandparents did not leave behind a fortune. They died completely bankrupt when I was 15, their hardware store swallowed by corporate debt. When Travis got me pregnant at 17, I had absolutely nothing. No safety net, no family money, no secret inheritance. I lived in a freezing apartment, working night shifts at a diner and day shifts cleaning offices just to afford baby formula and diapers. When Travis realized I was broke and struggling, he packed his bags and vanished into thin air. Every single penny of that $2 million trust fund was blood money. My blood, my sweat, my tears. I built JC Holdings from the ground up, starting with a single dilapidated duplex I bought at a foreclosure auction and flipped for a marginal profit. I reinvested every dime I made working 80-hour weeks while raising a child completely alone. When my commercial real estate firm finally took off, and I landed my first multi-million-dollar development deal, I did not buy myself a mansion or a yacht. I took $2 million of my own hard-earned profits and locked it away in a highly secure trust fund for Brittany. I wanted to guarantee that my daughter would never have to experience the soul-crushing poverty that Travis had abandoned us in. And now, 18 years later, that same deadbeat was back grinning on the sidewalk below my office, fully intending to steal the money I had sacrificed my youth to earn. He thought he had outsmarted me. He thought he could manipulate my daughter into hating me, wait for the clock to strike midnight on her 18th birthday, and walk away with the fruits of my labor. I took a slow sip of my scotch, feeling the pleasant burn in the back of my throat. I sat down in my leather executive chair and flipped to the third page of the trust agreement. When I originally established the fund, I knew how fragile sudden wealth could be. I knew that leaving a massive sum of money to a young adult required ironclad protection. That was why I did not use just any corporate lawyer to draft the paperwork. I used family. I hired my sister-in-law, Kendra. Kendra is married to my older brother, Derek, and she is an absolute powerhouse. An African-American attorney specializing in high-stakes foreclosures and estate law, Kendra possesses a legal mind so sharp and ruthless that opposing counsel usually settle out of court just to avoid facing her in a trial. She had seen firsthand how hard I worked to build my life. She knew exactly what kind of man Travis was. So when I asked her to draft the trust fund, Kendra made sure to include several specific clauses designed to protect the assets from predators. I traced my finger over the dense legal jargon, specifically focusing on the morality and trustee clauses we had embedded deep within the document. Travis had spent the last 2 years plotting his grand heist, assuming a trust fund was just a giant bank account that automatically dumped cash into Brittany's lap the second she turned 18. He never bothered to consider that a woman who negotiated ruthless commercial real estate acquisitions for a living might have read the fine print. I glanced at the sleek digital clock on my desk. The glowing red numbers read 3 in the morning. It was late, but the machinery of justice did not operate on a standard schedule. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and pressed the call button for Kendra. The line rang twice before she answered. Her voice was crisp, alert, and completely devoid of sleep. "I have been waiting for your call," Kendra said, the sound of rustling papers echoing slightly in the background. "Derek told me how the country club party went down. Tell me you did not let that man walk away with the Mercedes." "The car is sitting safely in my executive parking spot downstairs," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "But Travis and Brittany just left my office." They brought the police to try and arrest me for grand theft auto. I heard a sharp, humorless laugh on the other end of the line. Oh, he brought the police to a corporate asset dispute, Kendra noted. He really is as stupid as he was 18 years ago. I assume you showed them the title. I did. The officers threatened to arrest them for filing a false report. But before Travis left, he lost his temper. He screamed his entire plan right in my face. He told me they do not need the car because Brittany's trust fund unlocks next week. He bragged about buying yachts and Porsches. He wants to drain the entire $2 million to fund his new life with Vanessa. There was a brief silence on the phone, followed by the distinct sound of a pen tapping against a wooden desk. He really thinks he is about to become a millionaire on your dime, Kendra murmured, her tone shifting into pure, calculated legal strategy. He thinks the money is just sitting there, waiting for him to grab it. Yes, I said, looking out at the glittering lights of the Chicago skyline. He has completely convinced her to disown me. She announced it to the entire country club. She made her choice. Kendra. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the morality clause that was about to change the trajectory of all our lives. Kendra, I said quietly, it is time to pull the trigger. Prepare the transfer paperwork. Consider it done, sister, Kendra replied, her voice practically vibrating with anticipation. I will have Derek prepare the security detail for next week. Get some rest, Jocelyn. We have a lot of predators to hunt. I ended the call and set the phone down on the glass desk. The game had officially begun, and Travis had no idea he was playing against the house. The morning sun crept over the Chicago skyline, casting a harsh, unforgiving light across the glass surface of my desk. I had not slept a single minute since Travis and Brittany stormed out of my office with the police. I spent the remaining hours of the night consuming black coffee and meticulously reviewing every single line of the trust agreement. Travis was operating under a delusion so massive it was almost comical. He truly believed that my grandparents' people who died drowning in corporate debt had somehow hidden a fortune for their granddaughter. He convinced Brittany that I was just a bitter gatekeeper hoarding old family money. He had no idea that every dollar in that account was generated by my own commercial real estate acquisitions. It was my blood and my sweat locked away to protect my daughter from men exactly like him. At precisely 7 in the morning, the private elevator chimed. The polished metal doors slid open, and Kendra walked into the executive suite. She wore a tailored maroon suit that commanded absolute authority, her briefcase gripped firmly in her hand. Right behind her was my older brother Derek, carrying a tray of fresh coffees and looking completely exhausted. Derek set the coffees down on the table and let out a heavy sigh. He ran a hand over his face and looked at me with deep concern. I am so sorry about last night, Jocelyn. Kendra told me what Brittany did at the country club. I wanted to drive over to Travis's house and drag that man out onto the street myself. I shook my head, picking up a fresh cup of coffee. Violence is a poor man's revenge, Derek. We do not use our fists in this family. We use legally binding contracts. Kendra dropped her briefcase onto my desk with a satisfying thud. She popped the latches, pulled out a thick stack of legal pads, and took the seat directly across from me. She looked like a predator, analyzing its prey. Tell me exactly what that fool said in front of the police, Kendra demanded, her pen hovering over the paper. I want his exact words. I leaned forward, folding my hands together. Travis lost his temper when the police refused to arrest me for taking the Mercedes. He started screaming that they did not need the car anyway. He publicly bragged that Brittany's $2 million trust fund unlocks next week when she turns 18. He actually said they were going to buy 5 Porsches and a yacht. He fully intends to drain the entire account to fund his lifestyle with Vanessa. Derek scoffed loudly, shaking his head in disbelief. He thinks a trust fund is a lottery ticket. He really thinks you just hand over a briefcase full of cash the second she blows out her candles. Kendra let out a sharp, vicious laugh that echoed through the quiet office. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. He has absolutely no idea how estate law works. He thinks he hit the jackpot, but he just stepped onto a financial landmine. Kendra pulled the original trust document from the red folder I had laid out earlier. She flipped directly to the 3rd section, running her manicured finger down the heavy text until she found the exact paragraph she had drafted for me over a decade ago. She tapped the paper twice. Let us review the trap, Kendra said, her voice dropping into her professional courtroom cadence. When Jocelyn and I set this up, we built in a fail-safe, a highly specific morality and trustee clause designed to protect the assets from predators. Page 2. Clause 4. Section B. The funds are legally shielded until the beneficiary reaches the age of 25. However, there is a mechanism for early release at 18, but only under one absolute condition. Derek leaned over, reading the complex legal jargon over his wife's shoulder. The trustee must voluntarily relinquish control, he read aloud. Exactly, I confirmed, taking over the explanation. I am the sole trustee. I hold the keys to the vault. But here is the beautiful, devastating part that Travis does not know. If I voluntarily relinquish my position as trustee before Brittany turns 25, the clause triggers a character evaluation protocol. If there is documented proof of a severe breach in the familial relationship, specifically if the beneficiary publicly disowns the creator of the trust, the entire $2 million is instantly rerouted. Where does it go? Derek asked, though a slow grin was already spreading across his face. Kendra looked up, her eyes gleaming with predatory delight. It goes straight to the Chicago Orphanage Charity, every single penny. If Jocelyn signs the release form, the trust legally dissolves and the money vanishes into a tax-deductible charitable donation. Travis and Brittany will be left holding an empty bank account. The sheer brilliance of the trap hung in the air. For 18 years, I had poured my life into giving my daughter a safety net. But I was not a fool. I knew that money could destroy a young person if they were manipulated by the wrong crowd. I built the failsafe to ensure that if my daughter ever turned her back on our family in favor of greed, the money would serve a better purpose. Brittany had stood on a stage just hours ago in front of 100 witnesses and declared I was no longer her mother. She had pulled the pin on the grenade herself. So how do we get him to trigger the explosion? Derek asked, crossing his arms. Travis is greedy, but he is also paranoid. If we just hand him a document, he might get suspicious. We give him exactly what he wants. Kendra said, pulling her laptop from her briefcase and flipping it open. We play into his ego. Travis thinks he has already won. He thinks Jocelyn is intimidated by his threats of lawyers and police. We are going to offer a complete surrender. Kendra's fingers flew across the keyboard as she drafted an official legal correspondence from her firm. I watched the screen as the trap took shape. She addressed the email directly to Travis and Brittany. She kept the language cold, formal, and completely devoid of emotion. Jocelyn agrees to legally surrender her position as trustee of the fund, Kendra typed, reading the words aloud as they appeared on the screen. She acknowledges Brittany's desire for independence. Please come to our downtown law firm this Friday at noon to sign the final transfer documents and assume full control of the accounts. Kendra hit the send button. The email vanished into cyberspace, carrying our bait directly to the enemy. Now what? Derek asked, looking between us. Now, I said, staring out the window at the morning rush hour traffic beginning to clog the streets below. Now we wait for the poison to work. Travis is a narcissist. The moment he reads that email, he is going to think he defeated the big bad corporate executive. He is going to celebrate. He will probably start spending money he does not even have yet. Kendra closed her laptop with a sharp snap. Let him spend it. Let him dig a hole so deep he can never climb out. By Friday afternoon, he will be begging for mercy and I will be out of office. I finished the last of my coffee, feeling the fatigue finally wash away, replaced by a surge of pure adrenaline. The stage was set. The bait was taken. All that was left was to watch the dominoes fall. Kendra leaned back in the plush leather chair, the sharp lines of her maroon suit contrasting with the sleek glass of my conference table. The email was out there in the digital ether, sitting in Travis's inbox like a ticking time bomb. She let out a long, measured breath, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Kendra was not just my sister-in-law. She was a legal predator in the best possible way. As an African-American woman who had fought her way to the top of Chicago's notoriously brutal estate and foreclosure law sector, she had zero tolerance for parasites. She had spent the last 10 years watching me build my commercial real estate empire from nothing, and she despised Travis with a cold, professional intensity. Now that the bait is set, Kendra said, her voice dropping into a deadly calm register. Let us look at exactly what kind of financial ruin your ex-husband is currently facing. I ran a comprehensive asset check on him the second Derek told me about Brittany's little performance at the country club. Kendra pulled a thick black folder from her briefcase and slid it across the glass toward me. Derek stood behind his wife, resting a protective hand on her shoulder. He looked down at the folder and shook his head. It is worse than we thought, Jocelyn, Derek said. Travis is completely drowning. He has been playing the wealthy fun dad for 2 years, but it is all a house of cards. I opened the black folder and scanned the highlighted financial records. Travis had 0 liquid savings. He was buried under a mountain of high-interest credit card debt, mostly from taking Vanessa to upscale restaurants and buying Brittany expensive gifts to buy her loyalty. But the most glaring red flag was his housing situation. Travis and Vanessa lived in a massive 5-bedroom suburban house. According to the documents Kendra had pulled, the mortgage was in severe default. He is essentially bankrupt, I noted, tracing my finger over the staggering numbers. He has been putting on a show for my daughter, making her believe he is this successful businessman who can offer her a better life than I can, and he is doing it all on borrowed time. Exactly, Kendra said, tapping the desk. Travis is backed into a corner. He swooped back into Brittany's life 2 years ago, specifically because he knew her 18th birthday was approaching. He did his math. He figured if he could alienate her from you and play the hero, she would hand him the keys to the kingdom the second she gained access to her trust fund. I closed the folder, a heavy knot of disgust settling in my stomach. He manipulated his own daughter into publicly disowning her mother just to pay off his credit cards. He did, Derek agreed quietly. But he severely underestimated who he was dealing with. Kendra leaned forward, clasping her hands together. The legal trap we set up is flawless, Jocelyn. I want you to understand exactly how brutal this is going to be for him. When I drafted that morality and trustee clause 10 years ago, I designed it specifically with a parasite like Travis in mind. I looked at Kendra, grateful for her relentless foresight. Explain the mechanics of the transfer, I said. I want to know exactly how the hammer falls. Kendra's eyes gleamed with absolute authority. The $2 million is currently held in an irrevocable corporate trust managed by a third-party financial institution. You are the sole trustee, meaning you control the gates. The money is legally shielded from everyone, including Brittany, until she turns 25. The only loophole for an early release at 18 is if you voluntarily sign a relinquishment of control. Which is exactly what Travis expects me to do this Friday, I said. Yes, Kendra continued. But here is the fatal catch. Section B of the morality clause states that if the trustee relinquishes control, the third-party bank must immediately evaluate the beneficiary's standing. The clause explicitly states that if the beneficiary has publicly severed family ties or committed an act of public defamation against the creator of the trust, the funds are instantly forfeited. I took a slow sip of my coffee, and Brittany's speech at the country club triggers that forfeiture. Kendra pulled a flash drive from her pocket and set it on the desk. I already have high-definition video footage of Brittany's speech from 3 different guests who posted it on social media. She stood on a stage on a microphone and declared that you were no longer her mother and that Travis and Vanessa were her real family. That is undeniable public defamation and a formal severance of ties. So what happens on Friday? Derek asked, leaning in closer. On Friday, Kendra said, a wicked smile spreading across her face. Jocelyn will sit at my conference table and sign the relinquishment forms. Travis and Brittany will watch her do it. They will think they have won. But the second my firm submits those forms to the bank, the morality clause executes automatically. The bank's algorithm will review the attached evidence of Brittany's public disownment. The entire $2 million will bypass Brittany's accounts completely and wire directly to the Chicago Orphanage Charity. It is an irreversible corporate action. I felt a profound sense of justice wash over me. The money I had bled for would go to children who actually needed it, children who had no parents at all, rather than funding the lavish lifestyle of the man who abandoned me. There is one more thing we need to anticipate, Kendra warned, her tone growing sharp. Travis is a narcissist. Now that he has my official email inviting him to claim the trust on Friday, he is going to feel invincible. He has the legal correspondence in writing. He is going to use my email as proof of funds. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, he is broke and desperate, Kendra explained. He owes money all over town. With a written guarantee from a high-profile law firm that his daughter is about to inherit $2 million, Travis is going to leverage that email to get a short-term predatory hard money loan. He is going to borrow cash today to start living like a king before the actual trust money clears on Friday. He is going to spend money he does not even have yet. Derek realized, shaking his head in disbelief. Kendra smiled viciously, her eyes dark and calculating. Exactly. Travis thinks he hit the jackpot. He doesn't realize he just stepped onto a landmine. We let him dig his own grave this week. By the time Friday afternoon rolls around, he will be begging for mercy. Kendra pressed the send button with a sharp, definitive strike of her manicured finger. The email vanished from her screen, carrying our perfectly crafted legal bait straight into Travis's inbox. The message was a masterpiece of corporate deception. It offered no apologies and contained zero emotion. It simply stated that I, Jocelyn, recognized Brittany's desire for independence and had formally agreed to surrender my position as the sole trustee. It instructed them to arrive at Kendra's downtown Chicago law firm at exactly noon on Friday to sign the transfer documents. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my office, looking out at the morning traffic far below. The stage was set. It did not take long for the poison to work. Less than 2 hours later, Derek walked into my executive suite holding his tablet. His jaw was clenched so tightly, a muscle twitched in his cheek. He did not say a word. He just walked over to my desk, flipped the tablet around, and pressed play. It was a live stream from Brittany's social media account. She was standing in the center of Travis's sprawling suburban living room. Travis was hovering in the background, wearing a cheap designer knockoff shirt that strained against his shoulders. Vanessa was standing next to him, aggressively shaking a bottle of sparkling wine before popping the cork. The foam spilled all over the hardwood floor, but none of them cared. They were too busy celebrating money they did not actually have. "We did it, you guys!" Brittany squealed into the camera, her face flushed with pure, unadulterated greed. The Wicked Witch finally caved. My toxic mother officially surrendered the bag, $2 million coming straight to the good guys. Travis stepped into the frame, wrapping a heavy arm around Brittany's shoulders and pulling her close. He looked directly into the camera lens with a sickeningly smug grin. "That is right," Travis announced loudly. "We beat the corporate monster at her own game. This is what real family looks like. We stick together and we win. Next week we are buying a yacht." Brittany laughed, holding up a printed copy of Kendra's official legal email. She waved it at the camera like a winning lottery ticket, finally free from the toxic ATM. Brittany mocked, reading the caption she had pinned to the bottom of the screen. "I am officially rich. I do not need my mother or her stupid rules ever again. Education is for people who have to work. I am a millionaire now." Derek paused the video. He looked at me, his eyes dark with protective anger. "Jocelyn," he said quietly, "she is your daughter, but right now she is acting like a monster. Tell me you are not going to let them get away with speaking about you like this." I reached out and gently pushed the tablet face down on my desk. I did not shed a tear. I did not feel a single ounce of heartbreak. I just felt a cold, absolute certainty. "Let them celebrate, Derek," I said smoothly. "Pride always comes before the fall. They are digging a hole so deep they will never be able to climb out." Every word she just spoke into that camera legally fulfills the forfeiture requirements of the morality clause. She just handed us the very ammunition we need to execute the trap. I spent the rest of the week compartmentalizing the drama. I walked into boardrooms and negotiated the acquisition of a $50 million commercial high-rise. I reviewed architectural blueprints. I approved quarterly budgets. While Travis and Brittany were popping cheap wine and celebrating imaginary wealth, I was actively expanding my empire. I used the stark contrast between my reality and their delusion as fuel. On Thursday afternoon, the true magnitude of Travis's stupidity finally came to light. Kendra stormed into my office, bypassing my secretary entirely. She slammed her briefcase onto the sofa and let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You are not going to believe the level of financial suicide your ex-husband just committed," Kendra said, pacing across the carpet. "I have connections in the Chicago hard money lending circuit. Those are the shadow lenders, Jocelyn, the guys who hand out fast cash at brutal interest rates to desperate people." I leaned forward, instantly intrigued. What did he do? Kendra stopped pacing and looked at me with a predatory grin. "Travis took my official law firm email to a notorious predatory lender in the South Loop. He used the email as proof of pending funds. He convinced the lender that his daughter was inheriting $2 million on Friday and that he had full control over the assets. He took out a short-term bridge loan for $150,000. My eyes widened slightly. He took out a loan against a trust fund he has no legal access to. Yes, Kendra confirmed. And the interest rate on that loan is a staggering 40%. If he does not pay it back within 30 days, the lender has the right to seize whatever equity Travis has left in his suburban house. The same house that your company already secretly bought the defaulted mortgage for." "What did he buy with the cash?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. Kendra pulled out her phone and started reading off a list. "He put a massive non-refundable deposit down on a luxury yacht charter out of Navy Pier for the entire summer. He bought Vanessa a $20,000 diamond tennis bracelet. He rented a downtown penthouse suite for the weekend to throw a massive victory party. He blew through almost all of the cash in less than 48 hours. He spent $150,000 he does not have." I noted the reality of his impending doom settling over the room. "He signed a promissory note to a man who will absolutely destroy his life to collect that debt," Kendra corrected. "And tomorrow at noon, when the trust fund dissolves into $0, Travis is going to realize he just bankrupted himself." Friday morning arrived with a heavy, gray, overcast sky. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my penthouse suite, getting dressed for the execution. I bypassed my usual business casual attire and pulled out a custom-tailored charcoal gray power suit. I paired it with sleek black heels and a minimalist silver watch. I pulled my hair back into a severe, flawless knot. I looked like a woman who commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors. I looked exactly like the corporate monster Travis claimed I was. I grabbed my briefcase and took the elevator down to the garage. I slid into the driver's seat of the Mercedes-AMG, the same car Brittany had tried to claim as her own, and drove toward downtown Chicago. I arrived at Kendra's high-rise law firm at 11:45. Derek met me in the lobby, dressed in a sharp navy suit, acting as our physical barrier should Travis lose his temper again. We rode the elevator up to the 40th floor in silence. The receptionist buzzed us through the glass doors. Kendra was already waiting in the main conference room. The mahogany table was polished to a mirror shine. At the center of the table sat a single silver pen, resting on top of a crisp white legal document. I took my seat at the head of the table. Kendra stood to my right, holding a separate red folder containing the morality clause forfeiture documents. Derek stood firmly by the door, arms crossed. At exactly noon, the heavy glass doors of the conference room swung open. Travis swaggered into the room wearing a brand new designer watch he had clearly purchased with his fraudulent loan. Vanessa was clinging to his arm, the $20,000 diamond tennis bracelet sparkling conspicuously on her wrist. Brittany walked in behind them, wearing a pair of oversized sunglasses indoors, chewing gum with an arrogant, dismissive expression. They looked like royalty stepping in to collect their taxes. They had absolutely no idea they were walking straight to the guillotine. Travis pulled out one of the heavy leather chairs and dropped into it, spreading his arms wide like he owned the entire building. He shot a smug, triumphant grin across the mahogany table. He aggressively adjusted his cuffs, making absolutely sure the oversized, gaudy designer watch he had bought on credit caught the overhead lights. Vanessa slid into the seat next to him, deliberately crossing her arms, so her new $20,000 diamond tennis bracelet was resting right on top of the polished wood. Brittany did not even bother to sit properly. She slumped into the chair at the end of the table, keeping her oversized sunglasses firmly on her face. She loudly popped her chewing gum, scrolling through her phone with an air of complete boredom. She looked completely detached from the reality of the room, entirely consumed by the fictional wealthy persona she had built in her head over the last 48 hours. "Let us get this over with, Jocelyn," Travis commanded, drumming his fingers against the table. "We have a very tight schedule today. The yacht we chartered is waiting for us at Navy Pier, and the captain is expecting us for a champagne lunch. I do not have time to sit through one of your miserable corporate lectures. Just sign the paper and hand over the account details." I kept my hands folded neatly on the table. I looked past Travis and focused entirely on my daughter. I wanted to see if there was even a fraction of the little girl I had raised left inside her. I wanted to see if she felt any remorse for standing on that country club stage and trying to destroy me in front of 100 people. "You are missing your final exams today, Brittany," I said, keeping my tone perfectly even. "You worked hard all year to get your grades up. If you fail those exams, your college admissions will be revoked." Brittany let out a harsh, mocking laugh. She finally looked up from her phone, sliding her sunglasses down the bridge of her nose so I could see the absolute disdain in her eyes. "Are you seriously lecturing me about school right now?" Brittany scoffed. "I do not need college anymore. College is for people who actually have to work for a living. I am a millionaire now. Dad and Vanessa are going to teach me how to invest, and we are going to travel the world. I am officially done listening to your controlling rules. Just sign the paper so I never have to look at you again." The sheer level of delusion was breathtaking. She honestly believed that dropping out of high school to follow a deadbeat father onto a rented yacht was a brilliant life strategy. Travis had poisoned her mind, completely convincing her that education and hard work were just toxic tools I used to keep her trapped. Vanessa chimed in, leaning forward with a sickly sweet smile. "You really need to learn how to let go, Jocelyn. Brittany is an adult now. She is stepping into her rightful generational wealth. You tried to keep this money hidden from her, but the truth always comes out. We are her real family, and we are going to make sure she lives the life she actually deserves." Derek shifted his weight by the door, his jaw locked tight. I could tell it was taking every ounce of his willpower not to walk over and throw Travis and Vanessa out of the window. But I gave him a subtle shake of my head. We did not need physical force. We had something much more devastating. I turned my attention back to Travis. "You are absolutely certain this is the path you want to take, Travis. You are willing to stake your entire financial future and your daughter's future on this single transaction." Travis slammed his hand down on the table, leaning forward aggressively. "Stop stalling. You sent the email. You legally agreed to surrender your position as trustee. I already took out a massive loan against this trust fund to secure our summer charter and cover our celebration expenses. My lenders know the money is clearing today. If you try to back out now, I will have my lawyers tie you up in court for the next 10 years. Sign the damn paper, Jocelyn." He had just handed me a verbal confession. He confirmed exactly what Kendra had discovered. He had leveraged a predatory hard money loan with an exorbitant interest rate, gambling his entire existence on a trust fund he did not understand. He had backed himself directly onto the ledge, and now he was begging me to push him off. I did not argue. I did not shed a single tear or offer another word of warning. I reached out and picked up the silver pen resting in the center of the table. The heavy metal felt cool and solid in my grip. I pulled the crisp white relinquishment document toward me. I smoothly signed my name on the bottom line permanently and legally severing my role as the trustee of the $2 million fund. I set the pen down and slid the document across the smooth mahogany surface. Travis let out a loud, triumphant cheer. He grabbed Vanessa and kissed her aggressively. Brittany threw her hands in the air, actually squealing with delight. She pulled out her phone, immediately opening her camera to record the moment she became rich. "We did it," Brittany yelled to her followers on the live stream. "The toxic ATM finally surrendered. We are officially rich." Travis reached out to snatch the signed document off the table, his eyes wide with unadulterated greed. But before his fingers could even brush the paper, Kendra stepped forward. Her movements were lightning fast. She slammed her hand down flat on top of the document, pinning it to the desk. The sharp crack of her palm hitting the wood echoed like a gunshot, instantly silencing the celebration. Travis scowled, trying to yank the paper out from under her hand. Let go of it, you psychotic lawyer. The deal is done. She signed it. The money is ours. Kendra looked down at Travis with a smile so predatory, it made the blood freeze in my veins. She did not lift her hand. Instead, she picked up the thick red folder containing the original trust parameters and dropped it right in front of him. The deal is indeed done, Travis. Kendra said, her voice dropping into a lethal courtroom whisper. Jocelyn has officially surrendered her position as trustee. But before you start writing checks to your shadow lenders, let us read exactly what happens next. Turn to page 2, Clause 4, Section B. Let us discuss the morality clause you were too stupid to ask about. Travis stared at Kendra's hand pressing down on the relinquishment document. He let out a harsh bark of laughter, leaning back in his heavy leather chair. He aggressively adjusted his cuffs, looking around the room as if he had just been told a terrible joke. You really think you can scare me with some last-minute legal jargon? Travis sneered. My lenders already reviewed the email you sent. They verified the existence of the trust fund. You cannot just invent a new rule because you are mad we won. The money belongs to Brittany. Hand over the account routing numbers so we can leave. Kendra did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She simply used her free hand to open the thick red folder she had placed on the table. She pulled out the original notarized trust agreement from 18 years ago. An email invitation to sign a transfer is not the governing document of a corporate trust. Kendra said, her voice echoing with absolute terrifying authority. This document is. And since you were too busy spending money, you did not have to hire an actual estate attorney. I will provide this consultation for free. Kendra slid a perfectly manicured finger down the heavy parchment paper until she reached the specific clause. Page 2. Clause 4. Section B. Kendra read aloud, enunciating every single syllable with razor-sharp precision. It states that if the primary trustee, which is Jocelyn, voluntarily relinquishes control of the fund before the beneficiary reaches the age of 25, an automatic behavioral audit is triggered. The funds do not simply transfer. They are held in escrow while the beneficiary's standing is evaluated. Brittany scoffed loudly from the end of the table, though her posture had visibly stiffened. So what? I did not do anything illegal. It is my money. Kendra turned her piercing gaze toward my daughter. You are absolutely right, Brittany. You did not do anything illegal. But corporate trusts do not operate on criminal law. They operate on contractual conditions. And the condition for this specific trust is very clear. If the beneficiary publicly severs familial ties or commits an act of public defamation against the creator of the trust, all funds are immediately and permanently forfeited. Vanessa uncrossed her arms, her diamond tennis bracelet clinking loudly against the mahogany table. That is ridiculous, Vanessa snapped. You cannot prove any of that. Brittany just wanted her independence. Derek stepped forward from his position by the door. He held his tablet in one hand. He tapped the screen and set it down right in the middle of the conference table. The volume was turned all the way up. Brittany's voice filled the silent room, playing directly from the country club live stream. I wish you had never been my mother, the digital Brittany declared to 100 guests. I survived, and I am so grateful for my real family. To my dad, Travis, and to Vanessa. Thank you for showing me what unconditional love actually looks like. Derek stopped the video. He looked directly at Travis. A public declaration severing familial ties witnessed by over 100 people and broadcast on social media. It perfectly fulfills the forfeiture requirements of the morality clause. The color instantly drained from Brittany's face. She finally reached up and pulled her oversized sunglasses off, revealing eyes wide with sudden dawning horror. She looked at Travis, her voice trembling slightly. Dad, what are they talking about? What does forfeited mean? Travis swallowed hard, but his arrogance refused to let him back down. It means nothing, Travis barked, pointing an angry finger at Kendra. You cannot just keep the money for yourselves. That is fraud. If she does not get it, where does it go? You cannot just steal $2 million. I am not stealing anything, I said, finally speaking up. My voice was calm, steady, and completely devoid of pity. I built that wealth to protect my daughter. but I also built a failsafe to ensure my life's work would never fund a parasite like you." Kendra pulled a final piece of paper from the red folder. It was a wire transfer confirmation bearing the official seal of a major corporate bank. She slid it across the glass surface until it stopped right in front of Travis. When the forfeiture clause is triggered, Kendra explained, her smile turning entirely predatory. The entire $2 million is automatically and irrevocably diverted to the secondary beneficiary. In this case, that is the Chicago Orphanage Charity. The wire transfer was executed the very second Jocelyn's signature was authenticated by my firm. Travis stared down at the paper. His eyes darted frantically across the black and white text. He read the total transferred amount. He read the receiving institution. And then he read the final available balance in Brittany's trust account. $0. The reality of what had just happened slammed into the room like a freight train. Travis had leveraged a massive predatory hard money loan with a 40% interest rate. He had signed a non-refundable deposit on a luxury summer yacht. He had bought expensive jewelry and booked penthouse suites. He had financed an entire lifestyle of the rich and famous using a trust fund that no longer existed. "No!" Travis gasped, his hands actually shaking as he picked up the paper. "No, you cannot do this. You tricked us. This is a setup." Vanessa stared at the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Her breathing grew shallow and rapid. "Travis," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Travis, the loan. How are we going to pay back the loan today? The lender said he was going to start seizing assets by 5 o'clock. Travis exploded. He shot up from his chair so fast it tipped backward and crashed onto the floor. He slammed his fists down on the mahogany table, leaning over the surface and glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you won?" Travis screamed, spit flying from his lips. "You think you can outsmart me with a technicality? I will drag you through the mud. I will hire the most vicious, ruthless corporate litigators in the entire state of Illinois. I will sue you for fraud, for emotional distress, for every single penny you have ever made." I sat perfectly still, watching him lose his mind. "With what money, Travis?" I asked calmly. "Your shadow lender is going to bleed you dry by sunset." Travis laughed, a manic, desperate sound that echoed off the glass walls. "I have assets, Jocelyn. I am not some broke teenager anymore. I have a massive 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. I have equity. I will take out a second mortgage. I will leverage every single inch of my property to fund a lawsuit that will burn your real estate empire to the ground. You messed with the wrong man." I looked at Kendra. Kendra looked at Derek. Derek reached down and picked up Travis's overturned chair, setting it upright with a quiet thud. I turned my gaze back to my ex-husband, feeling a deep, profound sense of satisfaction. I steepled my fingers on the desk and let a slow, chilling smile cross my face. "About that house, Travis?" I said, my voice cutting through his hysterical rage like a scalpel. "Did you ever wonder why the bank never foreclosed on you, even though you have missed 18 mortgage payments over the last 5 years?" Travis froze. The frantic, aggressive energy that had just fueled his tirade evaporated in a single second. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and hollow. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to process the question. "What are you talking about?" Travis stammered, his voice dropping into a defensive, uncertain register. "I have an arrangement with my mortgage lender. The bank granted me a hardship forbearance. They know I am good for the money." I let out a slow, deliberate laugh. "Banks do not grant hardship forbearances that last for 5 years, Travis. Banks are not charities. When a homeowner misses that many consecutive payments, the bank does not wait around. They package that toxic defaulted debt and they sell it for pennies on the dollar to commercial real estate firms, just to clear their ledgers." Vanessa uncrossed her arms, the diamonds on her wrist suddenly looking like very heavy chains. "Travis, what is she saying?" Vanessa demanded, her voice shrill with rising panic. "You told me the house was fully paid off. You told me you owned it free and clear." Travis ignored her, his eyes darting frantically between me and Kendra. "You are lying. My mortgage is with a national bank. I still get the statements in the mail." Kendra reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents bound by a heavy black clip. The top page bore the unmistakable bright red stamp of the Cook County Circuit Court. She did not slide this document across the table. She held it up so Travis could see the bold legal print. "You receive automated statements from a third-party servicing company." Kendra corrected, her tone sharp and unyielding. "But the actual debt, the paper that proves who owns the property you sleep in every night, was sold off 4 years ago. It was purchased through a blind corporate auction by JC Holdings. Jocelyn's company bought your defaulted mortgage, Travis. She owns your debt. She owns your house." Brittany finally looked up, her expression completely shattered. She looked from Travis to me, her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, why would you do that?" I shifted my gaze to my daughter. "For 18 years, I made sure you had a roof over your head. When Travis stopped paying his mortgage and the bank was 3 days away from throwing you both out onto the street, I stepped in. I quietly bought the debt so you would not have to change high schools. I let him pretend to be the king of his castle so you could have a stable childhood. I subsidized his pathetic existence entirely for your benefit." I stood up from my chair, resting my hands on the cool glass of the conference table. "But you are not a child anymore, Brittany. You made that perfectly clear on the stage at the country club. You declared yourself an adult. You chose your real family. You publicly severed our relationship, which means my corporate subsidy of your living arrangements has officially expired." Kendra peeled the top document off the stack and tossed it across the table. It landed directly in front of Travis. "That is a court-ordered notice of eviction," Kendra announced, her voice ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel. "Jocelyn instructed my firm to finalize the foreclosure proceedings 3 days ago. Because your mortgage has been in severe documented default for over half a decade, there is no redemption period. The judge signed the order yesterday afternoon. The foreclosure is absolute." Travis stared blindly at the eviction notice. His hands trembled so violently he could not even pick up the paper. "You have exactly 72 hours to vacate the premises." Kendra continued, delivering the final fatal blow. "You are permitted to take your personal clothing and basic daily necessities. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, and the property itself now legally belongs to JC Holdings. If you are not off the property by Monday morning, the sheriff will physically remove you." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of total financial ruin. Vanessa started hyperventilating. She grabbed Travis by the shoulder and shook him, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his cheap suit. "Travis, say something," Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing wildly off the glass walls. "The yacht deposit. We put $150,000 down on the charter. We took money from that shadow lender in the South Loop. He told us he would break our legs if we did not pay him back by sunset. Where are we going to get the money? We do not have a trust fund. We do not have a house." Travis snapped. The realization that he was completely bankrupt, homeless, and actively hunted by a predatory lender broke whatever fragile sanity he had left. He let out a feral, wordless roar and lunged across the mahogany table directly at me. He never made it halfway. Derek moved with the terrifying speed of a man who had been waiting for an excuse all afternoon. He stepped out from the door, caught Travis by the collar of his jacket, and shoved him backward with incredible force. Travis crashed back into his chair, the heavy piece of furniture skidding across the carpet before slamming into the back wall. "Stay seated." Derek ordered, his voice low, calm, and incredibly dangerous. "If you take one more step toward my sister, I will not bother calling the police. I will throw you out of this 40th floor window myself." Travis stayed down, breathing heavily, staring at the floor in utter defeat. The bravado, the arrogance, the smug superiority were entirely gone. He was nothing but a desperate, broken man facing the exact reality he had tried to force onto me 18 years ago. Brittany sat frozen at the end of the table. She was crying now, real heavy tears spilling over her cheeks and dripping onto her expensive shirt. She looked at the fake father, who had manipulated her, then at the gold-digging stepmother, who was already panicking about her own survival. She finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. She had traded a mother who secretly bought a house to protect her for a man who used her as a pawn to pay his credit card bills. I picked up my briefcase. I buttoned my charcoal blazer, smoothing the fabric with steady, deliberate movements. I looked at the three of them sitting in the ruins of their own greed. "Your 72 hours started at noon," I said, my voice cold and absolute. "I suggest you start packing." I turned around and walked out of the conference room. Kendra and Derek followed right behind me. The heavy glass doors swung shut, sealing Travis, Vanessa, and Brittany inside a tomb of their own making. I did not look back. For the first time in 18 years, I felt completely, beautifully free. Travis stared at me across the smooth mahogany conference table. The arrogant sneer that had plastered his face for the last hour completely dissolved, replaced by a pale, sickly expression of sudden confusion. The frantic energy that had just fueled his violent outburst evaporated in a single heartbeat. He opened his mouth to speak, closed it, and then looked around the room as if searching for a punchline to a joke he did not understand. "What are you talking about?" Travis stammered, his voice dropping into a defensive, uncertain register. "I have a perfectly fine arrangement with my mortgage lender. The bank granted me a hardship forbearance program. They know I am good for the money. They are just restructuring my terms." I let out a slow, deliberate laugh. "Banks do not grant hardship forbearance programs that last for 5 consecutive years, Travis. Commercial banks are not charities. When a homeowner misses that many payments, the bank does not sit around waiting for a miracle. They package that toxic, defaulted debt and they sell it in blind corporate auctions for pennies on the dollar just to clear their ledgers." Vanessa abruptly uncrossed her arms. The heavy diamond tennis bracelet she had purchased with stolen, borrowed funds clinked sharply against the wood. She turned to her husband, her eyes wide with rising panic. "Travis, what is she saying?" Vanessa demanded, her voice shrill and trembling. "You told me the house was fully paid off. You told me you owned that estate free and clear when I moved in." Travis ignored his wife. He kept his eyes locked on me, his chest heaving as he tried to maintain his rapidly crumbling facade. "You are lying," Travis barked, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. "My mortgage is with a national bank. I still get the statements in the mail every single month. I have the paperwork at home." Kendra reached into her heavy leather briefcase. She did not rush. She moved with the terrifying, methodical precision of a predator closing in for the kill. She pulled out a massive, thick stack of legal documents bound by a heavy black clip. The top page bore an unmistakable bright red stamp from the Cook County Circuit Court. Kendra did not slide this document across the table. She picked it up and held it high so Travis could clearly read the bold legal print from across the room. "You receive automated statements from a third-party servicing company." Kendra corrected, her tone sharp and unyielding. "But the actual debt, the paper that proves who legally owns the property you sleep in every single night, was sold off 4 years ago. It was purchased through a blind commercial auction by an acquisition subsidiary. That subsidiary belongs to JC Holdings. Jocelyn quietly bought your defaulted mortgage, Travis. She owns your debt. She owns your house." The silence that fell over the conference room was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of total financial ruin. Brittany finally looked up from the end of the table. Her oversized sunglasses had slipped down her nose, revealing eyes that were completely shattered. She looked at Travis, the man she had proudly proclaimed as her real family just a few days ago, and then she looked at me. Her voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. "Mom, why would you do that?" I shifted my gaze to my daughter. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, I allowed a fraction of the heavy, exhausting truth to bleed into my voice. "For 18 years, I made sure you had a roof over your head," I said, looking directly into Brittany's tear-filled eyes. "When Travis stopped paying his mortgage and the bank was 3 days away from throwing you both out onto the street, I stepped in. I quietly bought the debt. I paid the property taxes. I paid the home insurance. I let him pretend to be the king of his castle because I did not want my teenage daughter dealing with eviction notices taped to her front door. I did not want you to lose your bedroom or have to change high schools. I subsidized his pathetic, bankrupt existence entirely to protect you." Travis sank slowly back into his chair, all the fight completely drained out of his body. He stared blankly at the red-stamped court file in Kendra's hands, realizing the absolute magnitude of his miscalculation. He had spent the last 2 years playing the hero, buying Brittany's affection with money he did not have, all while living in a house secretly owned by the very woman he was teaching his daughter to hate. "You lied to me!" Brittany cried, turning on Travis with sudden fierce betrayal. "You told me Mom was just trying to buy my love. You told me you provided everything for us. You do not even own the house. You do not own anything." Vanessa started hyperventilating. She grabbed Travis by the shoulder and shook him, her perfectly manicured nails digging deep into his cheap suit jacket. "Travis, do you understand what this means?" Vanessa shrieked, completely losing her composure. "The shadow lender in the South Loop, we put $150,000 down on the yacht charter. He told us he would break our legs if we did not pay back that hard money loan by sunset. You told him we had a house to use as collateral. We do not have a trust fund. We do not have a house. We have absolutely nothing." I stood up from my chair, resting my hands flat on the cool glass of the conference table. The time for protection had passed. The time for consequences had arrived. "You are right, Brittany," I said, drawing my daughter's attention back to me. "You do not have anything. You stood on a stage at the country club and told 100 people that you were a fully grown adult. You chose your real family. You publicly disowned me. Therefore, my corporate subsidy of your living arrangements has officially expired." I turned my attention to Kendra, nodding once. "Since Brittany no longer lives under my protection," Jocelyn said, my voice echoing with cold, absolute finality. "I instructed Kendra to finalize the foreclosure. The judge signed it yesterday." Kendra did not miss a single beat. Following my exact cue, she peeled the topmost document from her heavy stack of legal files. It was a crisp white sheet of paper bearing the unmistakable seal of the Cook County Sheriff's Office. She did not hand it to Travis gently. She tossed it across the smooth glass surface of the conference table. It slid to a stop right over the polished wood, coming to rest inches from his trembling hands. "This is an official court-ordered notice of eviction," Kendra announced, her voice ringing with the absolute finality of a judge striking a gavel. "Because your mortgage has been in severe documented default for over half a decade, there is no redemption period. You exhausted your legal grace periods years ago while you were busy playing a wealthy suburban father. The judge signed the order yesterday afternoon. The foreclosure is absolute and the eviction is immediate." Travis stared blindly down at the eviction notice. His chest heaved as his brain struggled to process the black and white text. "You have exactly 72 hours to vacate the premises." Kendra continued, delivering the fatal, unyielding blow. "You are permitted to take your personal clothing and basic daily necessities. Every single piece of furniture, every appliance, and the property itself now legally belongs to JC Holdings. If you are not completely off the property by Monday morning, the sheriff will arrive with a team of deputies to physically remove you and change the locks." The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the heavy, crushing silence of total financial ruin. The air in the room felt thick, charged with the undeniable reality that the lavish lifestyle Travis and Vanessa had built was nothing but a fragile paper castle, and I had just set it completely on fire. Vanessa started hyperventilating. She grabbed Travis by the shoulder and shook him, her perfectly manicured nails digging deep into the fabric of his cheap suit jacket. Her face was entirely drained of color, her eyes wide with a feral, instinctual panic. "Travis, say something!" Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing wildly off the glass walls of the conference room. "The yacht deposit. We put $150,000 down on that luxury summer charter. We took that cash from the shadow lender in the South Loop. He told us he would break our legs if we did not pay him back by sunset today. You told him we had a house to use as collateral. We do not have a trust fund. We do not have a house. Where are we going to get the money to pay back a hard money loan with a 40% interest rate?" Travis snapped. The realization that he was completely bankrupt, legally homeless, and actively hunted by a predatory lender broke whatever fragile, arrogant sanity he had left. He realized that the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had mocked and tried to extort, had systematically dismantled his entire existence without breaking a sweat. He let out a feral, wordless roar of pure rage. He shot up from his chair so fast that the heavy piece of furniture tipped backward and crashed loudly onto the floor. He planted his hands on the mahogany table and vaulted himself forward, lunging directly across the glass surface toward me with his hands outstretched. He never made it halfway. Derek moved with the terrifying explosive speed of a man who had been waiting for an excuse to intervene all afternoon. My brother stepped out from his position by the door, grabbed Travis by the collar of his suit jacket and the belt of his trousers, and shoved him backward with incredible brutal force. Travis crashed back down, skidding across the carpet before slamming hard into the back wall of the conference room. "Stay seated," Derek ordered. His voice was low, calm, and incredibly dangerous. "If you take one more step toward my sister, I will not bother calling the police. I will throw you out of this 40th floor window myself." Travis stayed down. He leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, staring at the floor in utter humiliating defeat. The bravado, the arrogance, the smug superiority that had radiated from him just an hour ago were entirely gone. He was nothing but a desperate, broken man facing the exact reality he had tried to force onto me 18 years ago when he abandoned a pregnant 17-year-old girl in a freezing apartment. I looked past Travis and focused on Brittany. My daughter sat completely frozen at the end of the table. She was crying now, real heavy tears spilling over her cheeks and dripping down onto her expensive designer shirt. She looked at the fake father who had manipulated her. She looked at the gold-digging stepmother who was currently crying hysterically about her own financial survival. Brittany finally understood the absolute magnitude of her mistake. She had traded a mother who secretly bought an entire suburban estate just to protect her high school experience for a man who used her as a pawn to pay off his credit card bills. She saw Travis for exactly what he was. He was not a savior. He was a parasite. "Mom." Brittany choked out, her voice trembling so violently she could barely form the word. "Mom, I am so sorry. I did not know. He told me you were stealing from me. He told me he was going to take care of us." I looked at my daughter, feeling a deep, profound ache in my chest. I loved her more than life itself, but I knew that saving her now would only teach her that betrayal had no consequences. She needed to feel the heat of the fire she had started. "You wanted to be an adult, Brittany," I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady, stripping away any trace of maternal comfort. "You wanted to make your own choices. You stood on a stage and told the world that Travis and Vanessa were your real family. You chose them. Now you get to experience exactly how they handle the real world." I reached down and picked up my leather briefcase. I stood up from my chair, taking my time to button my charcoal gray blazer. I smoothed the fabric with steady, deliberate movements, ensuring my posture was absolutely flawless. I looked at the three of them sitting in the spectacular ruins of their own greed. "Your 72 hours started at noon," I announced, my voice cold and absolute. "I highly suggest you go home and start packing." I turned around and walked out of the conference room. Kendra and Derek followed right behind me, their footsteps echoing with the rhythm of total victory. The heavy glass doors swung shut behind us, sealing Travis, Vanessa, and Brittany inside a corporate tomb of their own making. I walked toward the private elevator, my head held high, and I did not look back. The 72-hour countdown had officially begun, and the invisible clock ticking above Travis's head was deafening. The moment the heavy glass doors of Kendra's law firm sealed shut behind me, the last shred of Travis's false reality completely shattered. He did not stay to comfort his hysterical wife. He did not stop to console the teenage daughter he had just manipulated into financial ruin. He bolted. Travis sprinted out of the high-rise building and hit the downtown Chicago streets with the frantic, sweaty desperation of a cornered animal. He spent the entire Friday afternoon running from one commercial bank to another, desperately trying to secure a massive personal loan to save his suburban facade. He walked into pristine marble lobbies, adjusted his cheap suit, and flashed his most charming, confident smile at the loan officers. He spun wild, frantic tales about temporary cash flow issues and guaranteed upcoming investments. He begged for a second mortgage. He begged for a bridge loan. He begged for a line of credit. Every single bank gave him the exact same response. The loan officers would type his social security number into their systems. Look at the screen and the polite customer service smiles would instantly vanish from their faces. Travis had a credit score that was practically non-existent. He had not held a legitimate documented job in over 2 years, preferring to live off Vanessa's dwindling savings and the illusion of Brittany's upcoming trust fund. His financial history was a glowing red wasteland of defaulted credit cards, unpaid utility bills, and 18 consecutive missed mortgage payments. To make matters infinitely worse, the predatory hard money lender in the South Loop had already registered the $150,000 yacht deposit loan against Travis's name. When the bank saw that he owed a massive high-interest debt to a shadow lender that was defaulting that very same evening, they practically laughed him out of their offices. He was a walking financial liability. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, every legitimate financial institution in the city had slammed their doors in his face. While Travis was sweating through his suit in downtown bank lobbies, the atmosphere back at the suburban house was collapsing into total toxic chaos. Brittany sat alone on the floor of the massive living room. The grand, sprawling house that she had proudly called her castle just a few days ago now felt like a terrifying alien cage. She looked around at the expensive furniture, the large flat-screen television, and the vaulted ceilings. She finally understood that none of it belonged to Travis. Every single brick, every piece of wood, every luxury she had enjoyed for the past 5 years had been secretly funded by the mother she had just publicly disowned. The crushing weight of her own arrogance pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. She needed someone to tell her it was going to be okay. She needed the unconditional love Travis and Vanessa had loudly promised her on that country club stage. Brittany stood up, her legs trembling, and walked up the grand staircase to seek comfort from her stepmother. The door to the master bedroom was wide open. Brittany stopped in the doorway, her eyes widening in shock. Vanessa was not crying anymore. She was not trying to figure out a plan to save the family. Vanessa had 3 massive designer suitcases unzipped on the king-sized bed. She was moving with frantic, ruthless efficiency, pulling her most expensive dresses, shoes, and handbags from the walk-in closet and stuffing them into the luggage. She was wearing the $20,000 diamond tennis bracelet she had bought with the fraudulent loan, making absolutely sure it did not get left behind. "What are you doing?" Brittany asked, her voice shaking. "We have 3 days to pack the whole house. Why are you only packing your own clothes?" Vanessa stopped shoving a pair of heels into a bag and looked up. The sickly sweet, affectionate maternal mask she had worn for 2 years was completely gone. She looked at Brittany with cold, hard, absolute detachment. "I am packing the things that have resale value," Vanessa snapped, turning back to the closet to grab a stack of silk blouses. "Your father is a broke, pathetic liar. He told me he owned this estate. He told me you were getting $2 million today. I did not sign up to be homeless, Brittany. I am not going down with this sinking ship." "But Dad is at the bank," Brittany pleaded, stepping into the room. "He said he was going to get a loan. He said we are a real family. We stick together." Vanessa let out a harsh, cruel laugh that echoed off the high ceiling. "Grow up, Brittany. Your father cannot even get a loan to buy a used car, let alone save a foreclosed mansion. He used you. He played the fun, supportive dad because he wanted your mother's money. Now the money is gone, the house is gone, and a very dangerous man in the South Loop is looking for him. You are 18 now. Figure it out yourself." Brittany backed out of the room, her vision blurring with hot, humiliated tears. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Travis had no money, he had no job, he had no plan. He had used her as a pawn in a greedy, pathetic game of chess, and he had sacrificed her without a second thought. Jocelyn had been the only person actually protecting her, and Brittany had burned that bridge to ashes. The front door downstairs slammed open with a violent crash. Travis stormed into the house, his tie ripped off his shirt, soaked in nervous sweat. He looked wild, manic, and completely unhinged. He stomped into the living room and began pacing back and forth like a caged animal. He saw Brittany standing at the top of the stairs and completely ignored her. He did not offer a word of comfort. He did not apologize for dragging her into his mess. He was entirely consumed by his own impending ruin. He had failed in the boardroom. He had failed at the banks. The legal eviction was ironclad, and the sheriff was coming on Monday morning. Travis realized he could not beat me with money, and he could not beat me with the law. But Travis was a cornered rat, and cornered rats always play dirty. If she wants to play hardball, we will play hardball, Travis muttered to himself, pulling his phone from his pocket with shaking hands. She cares about her precious corporate reputation. She cares about her real estate empire. Let us see how her board of directors feels when her face is plastered all over the evening news. Travis scrolled past his rejected bank contacts and stopped on a number he had saved from his sleazier days. It was the direct line to a notoriously aggressive sensationalist reporter at a local Chicago tabloid news station, a man who thrived on destroying corporate executives with zero regard for the actual truth. Travis pressed the call button and pressed the phone to his ear, a malicious, desperate grin spreading across his sweaty face. "Yeah, is this the news desk?" Travis said, pitching his voice into a tone of absolute manufactured devastation. "I have a story for you. It is a major exclusive. I want to talk about the ruthless billionaire CEO of JC Holdings. I want to talk about how she is illegally using her corporate wealth to evict her own teenage daughter and throw her out onto the street just days after her 18th birthday. Bring your cameras to the suburbs tomorrow morning. I am going to expose everything." The morning of day 2 began with my face plastered across the morning news. The local tabloid network was notorious for sensationalist garbage, the kind of journalism that prioritized manufactured outrage over basic fact-checking. Travis had found their lead anchor, a man who thrived on dramatic corporate takedown stories, and handed him a completely fabricated masterpiece. I sat at my glass desk, my hands steepled together, watching the large flat screen mounted on my office wall. The volume was turned up just loud enough to hear the absolute poison spilling from my ex-husband's mouth. Travis stood on the front lawn of the suburban estate. He had clearly skipped shaving that morning and swapped his cheap designer suit for a wrinkled middle-class sweater. He looked exactly like a hard-working, devastated father fighting against a corrupt system. Brittany stood slightly behind him, wrapped in a heavy blanket, staring at the ground. She looked terrified, though I knew her terror came from realizing she was entirely broke, not from the lies her father was currently spinning on live television. The reporter looked directly into the camera, his voice dripping with dramatic empathy. He talked about corporate greed. He painted me as a billionaire tyrant, a ruthless CEO, evicting her own flesh and blood just days after the girl's 18th birthday. Travis actually managed to squeeze out a tear. He looked into the lens and delivered a performance that belonged in a theater. "She is punishing us," Travis told the reporter, his voice breaking perfectly on cue. "She is punishing my daughter simply because Brittany wanted a relationship with her father. Jocelyn controls everything with her money, and when she realized she could not control our family bond, she used a corporate loophole to steal our home. We have exactly 48 hours before the sheriff throws us out onto the street." He completely omitted the fact that he abandoned his pregnant girlfriend 18 years ago. He conveniently forgot to mention his massive predatory hard money loan, the yacht deposit, the diamond bracelet, and his failed attempt to steal a $2 million trust fund. He spun a narrative where he was the victim of a vindictive corporate giant. The heavy glass doors of my executive suite burst open. My chief public relations director and 3 of my top board members rushed into the room. They looked frantic, their eyes darting from the television screen to me. "Jocelyn, our switchboards are lighting up," the PR director said, his voice tight with rising panic. "This news segment is gaining traction on social media. People are calling for a boycott of our upcoming commercial development projects. The optics on this are an absolute nightmare. A corporate CEO evicting a teenager is a public relations disaster." One of the older board members stepped forward, wringing his hands nervously. "We need to issue a public apology immediately. We need to halt the eviction process. Maybe we can offer a settlement or set up a temporary housing fund for them, just to save our stock prices from taking a hit when the market opens. We cannot afford this kind of heat." I picked up the remote and muted the television. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I looked at the panicked men in my office with absolute freezing calm. We are not issuing an apology, I stated smoothly. We are not halting the eviction, and we are absolutely not offering a financial settlement to a man who just attempted to extort me. Jocelyn, the public will not understand the legal nuances of a defaulted mortgage, the PR director argued, stepping closer to my desk. Travis is controlling the narrative. He is playing the victim, and the court of public opinion always sides with the underdog. If we do not back down, this could permanently damage the firm's reputation. If we back down, we hand a loaded gun to an extortionist, I countered, my tone hardening. If we halt a legally binding court-ordered foreclosure just because a deadbeat father threw a tantrum on local television, we prove that this company can be intimidated. We do not negotiate with terrorists, and we certainly do not negotiate with scam artists. Hold your positions. By sunset, that news network will be begging us for forgiveness. Right on cue, Kendra walked into my office. My sister-in-law wore a sharp emerald green suit today, looking fresh, vibrant, and completely unbothered by the media circus playing out on the television. Derek followed right behind her, closing the heavy doors to block out the anxious murmurs of the corporate staff in the hallway. Kendra walked straight up to my desk and slammed a sleek silver flash drive down onto the glass. Travis wanted a media circus, Kendra announced, her voice ringing with predatory delight. So we are going to give him the main event. The board members stared at the small silver drive, looking completely bewildered. What is on that? The PR director asked tentatively. Kendra turned to face him, a fierce, commanding smile spreading across her face. That flash drive contains 18 years of public records. It contains the official court-ordered child support documents, proving Travis evaded his financial responsibilities for nearly 2 decades. It contains the financial records of his fraudulent 40% interest hard money loan from the shadow lender in the South Loop. It contains the undeniable paper trail, proving that Jocelyn personally funded that suburban estate to keep a roof over her daughter's head, while Travis lived rent-free. Derek crossed his arms, leaning back against the doorframe. We also included the police report from last night, Derek added. The one where Travis attempted to file false charges of grand theft auto, completely failing to realize he was trying to steal a corporate asset. The entire truth is on that drive, I said, looking back at my PR director. We are not going to draft a defensive press release. We are going to hand-deliver the absolute destruction of his character. The PR director finally relaxed his shoulders, a slow grin replacing his panic. We send this to competing news stations, he suggested. We let the rival networks tear that reporter's credibility to shreds. Before I could answer, the phone on my desk buzzed loudly. It was the lobby security desk. I reached out and hit the speaker button. Ms. President. The security guard stammered, his voice frantic and breathless. I am so sorry. There is a news crew. They bypassed the visitor turnstiles while a delivery group was coming in. They jumped into the priority elevator. They are heading straight up to your floor right now. I did not even have time to disconnect the call before a massive commotion erupted in the outer hallway. I could hear my administrative assistant shouting, demanding that they stop. The heavy glass doors of my suite were violently shoved open. The sleazy local reporter from Channel 8 pushed his way into my corporate office, a glaring camera light illuminating the room. A cameraman followed closely behind him, actively live broadcasting the entire ambush. The reporter shoved a microphone forward, aiming it directly at my face, a smug, aggressive look in his eyes as he prepared to deliver his ambush interview. The blinding white light of the camera rig washed out the ambient glow of the Chicago skyline, forcing my panicked board members to shield their eyes. The sleazy local reporter shoved his way right up to the edge of my glass desk, thrusting a microphone directly toward my face. His expression was twisted into a mask of aggressive manufactured righteousness. He was absolutely certain he had just cornered a corrupt billionaire in her lair. Ms. President, the reporter shouted over the chaos of my security team rushing down the hallway. How do you justify kicking your own 18-year-old daughter out of her family home? The public is outraged. Are the rumors true that you are using corporate loopholes to financially ruin a hardworking father just to settle a personal grudge? Two heavy-set security guards burst through the glass doors, reaching out to grab the cameraman by the shoulders. I raised my right hand, keeping my posture perfectly relaxed in my leather executive chair. "Stand down," I ordered my security team. My voice was quiet, but it carried an absolute authority that stopped the guards dead in their tracks. "Let them film. We have absolutely nothing to hide." The reporter looked slightly thrown off by my total lack of panic. He had expected me to cover my face, scream for my lawyers, and run out the back door. He did not expect me to sit there calmly steepling my fingers on my desk. If you are looking for a story about a financial monster who destroys families for personal gain, you came to the exact right place, I said, looking directly into the glaring lens of the camera. But you are pointing that microphone at the wrong person. Kendra stepped out from the shadows near the door. She smoothed the lapels of her sharp emerald green suit and walked gracefully toward the desk, moving with the terrifying confidence of an apex predator. She stepped right between the reporter and the camera, ensuring her face was perfectly framed in the shot. She held up the sleek silver flash drive, letting it catch the harsh light. "My name is Kendra, and I am the lead legal counsel for JC Holdings," she announced, her voice ringing with flawless courtroom precision. "We watched your morning broadcast. You spun a very compelling, tragic tale about a dedicated father being victimized by corporate greed. Unfortunately for your journalistic integrity, every single word that man spoke on your network was a calculated, verifiable lie." The reporter frowned, trying to regain control of his ambush interview. "The public records show you are foreclosing on his primary residence. You cannot deny you are throwing a teenager onto the street." Kendra let out a sharp, mocking laugh. She dropped the silver flash drive right onto the reporter's clipboard. "That drive contains 18 years of unsealed court documents," Kendra explained, staring the man down. "It contains the official state-mandated child support records proving that Travis completely abandoned his pregnant teenage girlfriend 18 years ago. He has evaded his financial responsibilities for nearly 2 decades. He owes hundreds of thousands of dollars in back child support. He is not a dedicated father. He is a documented deadbeat who only returned to his daughter's life 2 years ago because he believed she was about to inherit a $2 million trust fund." The reporter blinked, his aggressive stance faltering. He glanced down at the flash drive in his hand, his journalistic instincts suddenly realizing he had been played by his own source. Kendra did not give him a second to breathe. She kept dropping bombshells. "It gets significantly worse," Kendra continued, gesturing to the drive. "You will also find the financial records of a fraudulent 40% interest hard money loan Travis took out just 3 days ago from a known shadow lender in the South Loop. He used a forged promise of his daughter's non-existent trust fund to borrow $150,000. He blew that cash instantly on a luxury yacht deposit and diamond jewelry. He is entirely bankrupt." I stood up from my desk, buttoning my charcoal blazer, and walked around to face the camera alongside my sister-in-law. "As for the house you claim I am stealing," I added, keeping my gaze locked on the lens. "That suburban estate was in severe default for 5 years. The bank was going to throw my daughter out onto the street. I quietly used my corporate assets to purchase his defaulted mortgage. I paid his property taxes. I paid his insurance. I kept a roof over my daughter's head while that man lived rent-free and pretended to be wealthy. The foreclosure is simply the legal expiration of my charity, now that my daughter is a legal adult who publicly declared she no longer wants my support." The reporter was completely speechless. The cameraman slowly lowered the rig, the red recording light still blinking. They had marched into my office expecting to destroy a corporate tyrant. Instead, they had just been handed the most explosive, verifiable financial scandal of the year. "You wanted an exclusive story about a ruthless scam artist destroying a family," Kendra said, delivering the final fatal blow. "You just interviewed him on your 6 o'clock morning broadcast. I highly suggest you plug that flash drive into your laptop before a rival network breaks the real story." The reporter looked at the drive, then at his cameraman. The sheer magnitude of the ratings goldmine he was holding washed over his face. He did not ask another question. He turned around and sprinted out of my executive suite, practically dragging his cameraman behind him. That evening, the entire narrative violently flipped. I sat in my penthouse living room with Derek and Kendra watching the late-night news broadcast. The same sleazy reporter was back on the screen, but this time his tone was entirely different. He stood in front of the television studio graphics, looking directly into the camera with an expression of aggressive, righteous indignation. The headline flashing across the bottom of the screen read, "Fake Suburban Dad Exposed in Massive Financial Scam." "We issued a correction this morning regarding the JC Holdings foreclosure case," the reporter announced to the entire city of Chicago. "We have uncovered exclusive verified documents proving that the so-called victim in this story is actually a serial fraudster." The network broadcast the official child support evasion documents. They broadcast the details of the yacht deposit and the illegal shadow loan. They completely dismantled Travis's entire existence on live television, exposing him not just to the public, but to the dangerous lenders he had borrowed from. The news segment showed shaky smartphone footage of Vanessa running out of a high-end boutique, covering her face with her designer handbag, as paparazzi shouted questions about her husband's bankruptcy. Travis was publicly entirely and irreversibly ruined. He had tried to use the media as a weapon to destroy my reputation, and instead he had handed me the exact tool I needed to burn his fraudulent life to the ground. I turned off the television and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawling city lights. The smear campaign had backfired with catastrophic precision. Travis had nowhere left to hide. His creditors knew he was broke. His wife knew he was a fraud. The entire city knew he was a deadbeat. The weekend passed in a heavy, inevitable blur of silence. No more threats came through my phone. No more public relations disasters needed managing. There was only the quiet, ticking reality of the legal clock winding down to zero. The sun rose on Monday morning, casting a cold gray light over the city. I checked the gold watch on my wrist. It was exactly 8 in the morning. It was the morning of day 3. The 72-hour grace period had officially expired. Time was up. The sun rose on Monday morning, casting a cold gray light over the city. I checked the gold watch on my wrist. It was exactly 8 in the morning. The 72-hour grace period had officially expired. Time was up. I sat in the back of my chauffeured black SUV parked discreetly at the end of the cul-de-sac in the upscale suburban neighborhood where Travis had spent the last 5 years playing king of the castle. The neighborhood was a picture of serene, affluent perfection. Automated sprinklers swept across perfectly manicured lawns. Residents jogged past in expensive athletic wear. It was the exact type of environment Travis craved, a place where status was everything and appearances meant survival. At exactly 8:05, the serene morning was violently shattered. 2 Cook County Sheriff cruisers turned onto the street, their lights flashing in a silent, authoritative warning. Right behind them rumbled a massive 18-wheeler commercial moving truck. The side of the truck bore the sleek, undeniable logo of the property management firm partnered with JC Holdings. The convoy crawled down the pristine street, drawing the immediate attention of every neighbor within a 3-block radius. The vehicles came to a heavy synchronized stop directly in front of Travis's sprawling estate. I rolled down the tinted window of my SUV just an inch, allowing the crisp morning air into the cabin. I watched as 4 armed sheriff's deputies stepped out of their cruisers. They did not walk with the casual stroll of a wellness check. They moved in a tight tactical formation straight up the paved driveway. The lead deputy pounded on the heavy oak front door. The sound echoed down the quiet street like thunder. It took nearly 2 minutes for the door to open. When it did, Travis stood in the doorway and he looked absolutely destroyed. The man who had strutted into my corporate office on Friday wearing a designer suit now stood in wrinkled sweatpants and a stained undershirt. His face was pale and covered in a thick layer of unkempt stubble. The aggressive, narcissistic bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by the cornered, frantic look of a man who had entirely run out of options. "There has been a mistake," Travis stammered, holding his hands up defensively as the deputies stepped onto his porch. "My legal team is filing an emergency injunction this morning. We just need a few more days to process the paperwork. You cannot do this right now." The lead deputy did not even blink. He held up a clipboard with the red-stamped court order pinned to the front. "There is no mistake, sir. the deputy stated, his voice loud enough to carry across the perfectly trimmed hedges. This property is now under the legal possession of JC Holdings. You are in violation of a court-ordered eviction. You and your family have exactly 30 minutes to gather your personal clothing and vacate the premises. If you are not off this property by 8:40, you will be placed under arrest for criminal trespassing. Travis's jaw dropped. But I have a teenage daughter, he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperate manufactured panic. You cannot throw a kid out onto the street. We just need one more week. I have a loan coming through. Your 30 minutes started right now, the deputy replied coldly. Step aside. The deputies pushed past Travis and entered the house. Through the open front door, I could hear the immediate chaotic explosion of panic. Vanessa started screaming at the top of her lungs, her voice shrill and hysterical, as she realized the shadow lenders were no longer her biggest problem. The police were actually throwing her out. According to the strict protocols I had established with the property management team, the rules of the eviction were absolute. The occupants were only permitted to take personal garments and basic toiletries. Every single piece of furniture, every television, every luxury appliance, and every piece of expensive decor technically belonged to the estate, which was now fully owned by my corporation. Through the large bay windows of the living room, I watched the execution of those rules unfold. Vanessa was sprinting through the house, frantically trying to stuff a heavy silver candelabra and a stack of expensive silk throw pillows into a duffel bag. A deputy immediately stepped in front of her, placing a firm hand over the bag. Personal clothing only, ma'am, the deputy warned, pulling the silver piece out of her hands. All fixtures and furnishings remain with the property. Leave it. Vanessa threw a massive, unhinged tantrum right there in the foyer. She screamed that she had bought those items with her own money, completely ignoring the fact that she had bought them using Travis's fraudulent credit lines. The deputy remained entirely unmoved, pointing a stern finger up the stairs, ordering her to finish packing her clothes. Brittany emerged from her bedroom, carrying 2 black trash bags stuffed to the brim with her wardrobe. She walked down the grand staircase like a ghost. She did not argue with the deputies. She did not yell at Travis. She looked completely broken, her eyes swollen and red from 3 days of crying. She finally understood that the luxury she thought she was entitled to was nothing but a fragile illusion I had maintained for her. Now that the illusion was gone, she was left holding nothing but garbage bags. At exactly 8:35, the deputies marched the 3 of them out the front door. It was the ultimate walk of shame. Travis, Vanessa, and Brittany stumbled down the driveway, dragging their suitcases and trash bags behind them. The entire neighborhood had stepped out onto their porches or paused their morning jogs to watch. These were the wealthy, status-obsessed neighbors Travis had spent 5 years trying to impress. Now they stood holding their coffee mugs, whispering to each other as they watched the loudest, most arrogant man on the block get legally thrown to the curb. Travis tried to keep his head down, using his jacket to shield his face from the judging stares of his peers, but there was nowhere to hide. The moving crew immediately swarmed the property, rolling heavy dollies up the driveway and loudly changing the brass locks on the front doors. Brittany dropped her trash bags onto the wet grass near the sidewalk and sank down onto them. She pulled her knees to her chest, shivering in the cool morning air, looking around at the hostile, unsympathetic faces of the neighbors she used to call friends. Travis stood on the curb, furiously typing on his phone, desperately trying to call anyone who would lend him cash or a couch to sleep on. But his network was entirely gone. His reputation was ashes. Just as Travis turned to say something to his wife, a sleek black SUV with an illuminated rideshare sticker pulled smoothly up to the curb. It parked directly in front of the pile of luggage. Vanessa did not hesitate. She grabbed the handles of her 3 heaviest, most expensive designer suitcases and dragged them toward the trunk of the waiting vehicle. Travis lowered his phone, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Vanessa? What are you doing?" he asked, stepping toward the car. "Where are you going? We need to figure out a hotel for the night." Vanessa popped the trunk and heaved her bags inside. She turned around to face the man she had proudly claimed as her loving husband just days prior on the country club stage. She did not look at him with a shred of sympathy. She looked at him with the cold, calculating detachment of a woman who had just realized her investment had completely tanked. "I am leaving." Travis, Vanessa stated sharply, her hand resting on the open door of the vehicle. I called this car for myself. You and your daughter can figure out your own hotel. Travis stepped off the concrete curb, his hands reaching out frantically to grab the handle of the open car door. His knuckles were white, his face pale and slick with a cold, terrified sweat. He looked at Vanessa with wide, desperate eyes, completely unable to process the betrayal unfolding right in front of him. Vanessa, what are you talking about? Travis stammered, his voice cracking loudly enough for the neighbors standing on their porches to hear. You cannot leave right now. We are a team. We are going to call my lawyers and we are going to fix this. We just need to regroup. Vanessa let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the crisp morning air like a jagged piece of glass. She looked at her husband with an expression of pure, unadulterated revulsion. She did not see a partner. She saw a sinking ship, and she was already securing her spot on the lifeboat. Fix this! Vanessa scoffed, her voice dripping with absolute venom. Travis, there is nothing left to fix. You do not have lawyers. You do not have a house. You do not have a single dime to your name. You are entirely bankrupt. Travis flushed a deep, humiliating shade of red. He glanced nervously over his shoulder at the wealthy suburban neighbors who were openly watching his public destruction. Do not do this right now, he pleaded in a harsh whisper. You are embarrassing us. We are a family. Vanessa slammed the trunk of the SUV shut with a heavy metallic thud. She turned around and marched right up to Travis, jabbing a perfectly manicured finger hard into the center of his chest. We were a business arrangement, Vanessa announced, completely disregarding his plea for discretion. I only married you because you promised me that your daughter was inheriting $2 million today. You showed me the emails. You told me we were going to live on a luxury yacht and travel the world. You promised me generational wealth. Instead, you are just a broke, pathetic loser who got completely outsmarted by his ex-wife. Brittany stood frozen on the wet grass next to her black trash bags. She heard every single word. The illusion of unconditional love that Travis had meticulously built over the past 2 years was being violently ripped away, layer by agonizing layer. Her real family was not a family at all. It was a financial transaction, and her trust fund was the only currency that mattered. Vanessa reached for the passenger door handle of the black SUV. She looked Travis up and down one last time, her eyes narrowing with cold, calculating survival instinct. The shadow lender from the South Loop called my cell phone this morning, Vanessa said, delivering a final devastating blow. He knows the trust fund money is gone, Travis. He knows you used forged documents to secure that hard money loan for the yacht deposit. He told me he is sending his debt collectors to find you right now. I am not getting my legs broken because you are a pathetic scam artist. Have a nice life on the streets. Vanessa slid into the back seat of the vehicle and slammed the door shut. The driver immediately put the car in gear and sped away down the pristine suburban street, leaving Travis standing in a cloud of exhaust fumes. Travis stood paralyzed on the curb. His chest heaved as he pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen was lighting up with a barrage of unread messages and missed calls. The reality of the shadow lender actively hunting him finally set in. He was not just legally homeless. He was in immediate, severe physical danger. He owed $150,000 to a man who did not use the court system to collect debts. Down at the far end of the cul-de-sac, a dark, heavy sedan with heavily tinted windows turned onto the street. It did not look like a police cruiser. It moved slowly, creeping past the manicured lawns, looking exactly like the kind of vehicle a predatory lender sends to extract payment. Or perhaps it was an unmarked vehicle carrying federal agents coming to arrest him for wire fraud and falsifying loan applications. Travis panicked. His survival instinct kicked into overdrive, completely overriding any remaining shred of parental responsibility he might have possessed. The protective, loving father persona he had worn like a mask instantly vanished. He looked at Brittany. She was shivering in the cool morning breeze, holding her arms tightly around herself, staring at the man she had chosen over me. She was waiting for her father to tell her what to do next. She was waiting for him to protect her. Travis took a fast, panicked step backward. Brittany, listen to me, he stammered. his eyes darting frantically toward the approaching dark sedan. I have to go. I cannot be here right now. They are looking for me. Brittany's voice broke a raw, terrified sound escaping her throat. Dad, where are we going? What about my stuff? I am not taking you with me, Travis said. His voice was completely devoid of warmth. It was hollow, selfish, and cowardly. You are an adult now. You wanted independence. Call your mother and figure it out yourself. Without another word, without a single backward glance, Travis turned and sprinted across the neighbor's perfectly manicured lawn. He hopped a low stone fence and disappeared down a narrow wooded alleyway, behind the houses fleeing like a common criminal. He abandoned his own 18-year-old daughter on the sidewalk surrounded by garbage bags just as easily as he had abandoned her 18 years ago in a freezing apartment. I would later learn exactly what happened to Brittany after Travis vaulted over that stone wall and vanished into the alleyway. My daughter stood completely paralyzed on the wet concrete. The dark sedan that Travis had been so terrified of slowly cruised past her, the occupants inside barely giving her a second glance before accelerating down the street to hunt down their actual target. Brittany was left entirely alone standing next to two black plastic garbage bags filled with her designer clothes. A cold, unforgiving Chicago rain began to fall. It started as a light drizzle and quickly turned into a heavy, freezing downpour. Brittany pulled her thin jacket tight across her chest, shivering as the rain plastered her hair against her face. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her battery was sitting at 14%. She opened her contacts and immediately dialed her best friend, the same girl who had loudly cheered for her on the country club stage when she publicly disowned me. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried another friend, a girl whose family regularly vacationed in Aspen. The phone rang once before the call was manually declined. Desperate, Brittany sent out a group text to 4 of her closest friends, begging for a couch to crash on just for the night. She watched the little read receipts pop up one by one. Not a single person replied. The harsh reality of affluent suburban high schools finally set in. Her friends did not care about her personality. They cared about the massive mansion she lived in. They cared about the lavish pool parties and the promise of a $2 million trust fund. The second the sheriff's cruisers showed up and the neighborhood rumor mill confirmed she was broke, her social currency dropped to absolute zero. She was a liability, and wealthy teenagers do not associate with liabilities. With her phone battery flashing red, Brittany grabbed the thick drawstrings of her 2 trash bags. Her expensive designer sneakers instantly soaked through as she began dragging her life down the sidewalk. She walked for 2 miles in the freezing rain, leaving the pristine, manicured lawns of her childhood neighborhood behind. She crossed over the highway overpass and entered the gritty commercial outskirts of the city. She had exactly $48 crumpled in her purse, leftover cash from a shopping trip I had funded weeks ago. She found a run-down, single-story motel sitting in the shadow of a neon liquor store sign. The glowing red letters advertised rooms for $40 a night. Brittany walked into the dingy lobby, shivering and dripping wet, and placed her crumpled cash on the scratched laminate counter. The clerk did not ask her any questions. He just slid a heavy brass key across the desk. Brittany dragged her garbage bags into room number 12. The door locked behind her with a hollow metallic clank. The room smelled heavily of stale cigarette smoke and cheap bleach. The floral wallpaper was peeling at the corners, and the single mattress sagged deeply in the middle under a stained brown bedspread. Brittany collapsed onto the edge of the bed. Her stomach let out a loud, painful growl. She had not eaten anything since the morning before. She found 2 quarters in the bottom of her purse, walked out into the freezing exterior breezeway, and bought a stale package of peanut butter crackers from a flickering vending machine. She sat alone in the dim light of that $40 motel room, slowly eating stale crackers, while the roar of highway traffic rattled the thin window panes. In that miserable, isolated silence, the crushing magnitude of her own arrogance finally broke her. Brittany looked around the depressing, filthy room and realized this was the actual reality Travis had to offer. This was what his life actually looked like without my money propping him up. If I had not stepped in 5 years ago and secretly bought that defaulted mortgage, Brittany would have spent her entire high school career moving from one seedy motel to another. She thought about the court documents Kendra had thrown onto the conference table. She remembered the red stamps and the absolute proof of my silent, continuous financial support. I had taken every single one of her rebellious tantrums. I had absorbed every hateful comment, every rolled eye, and every accusation of being a toxic, controlling monster. I took all of her abuse, and I still quietly paid the property taxes so she could sleep in a warm, safe bed. I subsidized a man I actively despised just so she could have the illusion of a happy family. Travis and Vanessa did not love her. They never loved her. They only loved the $2 million they thought was waiting for them at the finish line. The absolute second Kendra revealed the trust fund was gone, Vanessa packed her bags and abandoned her. The second, a shadow lender came looking to collect a debt, Travis ran for his life and explicitly told his own daughter he was not taking her with him. They discarded her like literal trash on the sidewalk. Brittany pulled her knees up to her chest and wept. She cried until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen shut. She cried for the mother she had betrayed, for the immense, unyielding love she had completely taken for granted. She spent the entire terrifying night wide awake, listening to strangers arguing in the parking lot, finally understanding the true cost of her independence. When the gray morning light filtered through the dusty motel blinds, Brittany stood up. Her phone was completely dead. She had no money, no credit cards, and no car. She walked into the tiny, rust-stained bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. She looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The spoiled, entitled country club princess was gone. She walked back out into the main room and looked down at the 2 garbage bags filled with her expensive designer clothes. She did not grab them. She knew she did not deserve those clothes anymore. She left them sitting right there on the stained carpet. Brittany walked out of the motel room, stepping into the crisp, harsh morning air. She oriented herself toward the towering glass skyline of downtown Chicago, visible in the distance. It was a 5-mile walk to the financial district. She tightened her damp jacket around her shoulders, kept her head down, and started walking toward JC Holdings. She was finally ready to face the music. The towering glass facade of the JC Holdings corporate building loomed over the busy Chicago streets. For Brittany, the 5-mile walk from that filthy roadside motel had been a grueling march of shame. Her expensive designer sneakers were soaked with dirty puddle water. The sharp morning wind whipped through her thin, damp jacket, chilling her to the bone. She pushed through the heavy revolving doors and stepped into the pristine, climate-controlled lobby. The contrast was jarring. The lobby smelled of expensive citrus air fresheners and polished marble. Business executives in tailored suits walked past her holding briefcases and hot coffees, discussing quarterly margins and commercial developments. Brittany stood shivering in the center of the room, looking entirely out of place. She approached the main security desk. The guard on duty was the exact same man who had watched her storm into the building just a few days ago, alongside Travis, demanding to see me with absolute entitled arrogance. Today, Brittany did not demand anything. She wrapped her arms tightly around her stomach and looked at the guard with wide, red, exhausted eyes. "Can you please tell my mother I am here?" Brittany asked, her voice cracking. Up in my executive suite, the sleek phone on my desk buzzed loudly. I reached out and pressed the speaker button. The security guard informed me that my daughter was waiting downstairs. He noted that she looked terrible, completely soaked from the rain and visibly trembling. A sharp, painful pang of maternal instinct flared in my chest. Every cell in my body wanted to rush down to the lobby, wrap her in a warm coat, and tell her everything was going to be perfectly fine. But I swallowed that instinct. I forced it down into a dark, locked box inside my mind. I had spent 18 years shielding her from the harsh realities of the world, and it had nearly cost her her entire future. If I ran down there and rescued her now, she would never truly understand the value of loyalty or the devastating consequences of greed. She needed to face the music. "Send her up," I instructed the guard. A few minutes later, the private elevator chimed. The polished metal doors slid open, and my 18-year-old daughter stepped into my office. The transformation was staggering. The arrogant sunglasses-wearing teenager who had loudly popped her chewing gum and mocked my corporate rules was entirely gone. Brittany looked small, broken, and completely defeated. Her hair was damp and tangled. Dark circles ringed her eyes from a sleepless night spent listening to strangers argue in a seedy motel parking lot. She took one look at me sitting behind my glass desk and completely fell apart. Brittany collapsed to her knees right there on the expensive office carpet. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving with massive, uncontrollable sobs. The sound of her crying echoed off the floor to ceiling windows, raw and filled with absolute despair. Mom, Brittany choked out, her voice barely coherent through her tears. Mom, I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry. I stood up from my chair and walked around the desk. I did not rush. I walked slowly, maintaining my posture and my composure. I stopped a few feet away from her, looking down at the daughter I had sacrificed my entire youth to raise. He left me, Brittany sobbed, looking up at me with a shattered expression. Travis just ran away. The police came and the house was gone, and Vanessa packed her bags and drove off in an Uber. Dad just looked at me and said he was not taking me with him. He told me to call you and figure it out. He left me sitting on the sidewalk in the freezing rain. I kept my expression perfectly neutral, even though my heart was breaking for her. I knew he would, Brittany. I tried to warn you, but you chose to believe his lies. You chose to believe that I was a toxic monster holding you back from a life of luxury. I was so stupid, Brittany cried, scrambling to her feet and taking a tentative step toward me. He manipulated me, Mom. He told me you were stealing from my trust fund. He told me we were going to travel the world and be a real family. He bought me expensive dinners and made me feel like I finally had a dad. I did not know he was completely bankrupt. I did not know you were secretly paying the mortgage just to keep a roof over my head. She reached out her trembling fingers, grasping the sleeve of my blazer. She looked at me with the desperate, pleading eyes of a little girl who just wanted her mother to fix a scraped knee. I know I messed up. Brittany pleaded, the tears streaming down her face unchecked. I know I said horrible things on that stage at the country club. I know I humiliated you. But I'm ready to come back now. I left all those designer clothes at the motel. I do not care about the money anymore. I just want to go home. Please, Mom. Let us go home. Let us go back to the penthouse. I promise I will follow all your rules. I will go back to school. I will be perfect. She expected me to fold. She expected the unconditional love of a mother to override the logical boundaries of a corporate CEO. She expected me to pull her into a tight embrace, wipe her tears away, and drive her back to a warm bed in our luxury high-rise. She wanted the safety net to magically reappear beneath her. She thought that because she finally understood the truth, the consequences of her actions would simply be erased. I reached out and gently placed my hands on her shoulders. I looked directly into her red, swollen eyes. I felt a tremendous, overwhelming wave of love for her, but I also felt a core of pure, unyielding steel. I love you, Brittany, I said, my voice soft but echoing with absolute firmness. I will always love you. And I forgive you for what you said at the country club. I forgive you for choosing Travis. Brittany let out a massive sigh of relief. A fresh wave of tears fell from her eyes and she leaned forward, ready to bury her face in my shoulder and end the nightmare. She thought the ordeal was officially over, but I held her at arm's length, refusing to let her close the distance between us. Her relieved smile faltered, confusion quickly replacing her comfort. She looked at my hands, holding her back, then up at my face. I forgive you, Brittany, I repeated, ensuring she heard every single syllable. But you are not coming home. Brittany stared at me, her red and swollen eyes blinking in absolute confusion. The heavy silence of my executive office seemed to amplify the crushing weight of the words I had just spoken. She shook her head slowly, her damp hair clinging to her cheeks, entirely unable to process the boundary I had just drawn. What do you mean I am not coming home? Brittany asked, her voice trembling with rising panic. Mom, I just told you I am sorry. I told you I understand that Travis lied to me. I will do whatever you want. I will follow every single rule you have. You do not have to punish me anymore. I kept my hands firmly on her shoulders, grounding her in the reality of the moment. I am not punishing you, Brittany, I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. I am saving you. But I cannot save you by putting you right back into the glass tower I built. I stepped back, putting physical distance between us. I walked around to the front of my massive glass desk and leaned against the smooth edge. I needed her to see me not just as the mother she had taken for granted, but as a woman who had fought tooth and nail for every single thing she possessed. For 18 years, I gave you everything I never had. I explained, looking directly into her eyes. When I was 17 years old, I was scrubbing office floors and eating leftover diner food just to make sure I could buy your baby formula. I was terrified every single day. I built a massive corporate real estate empire because I never wanted you to feel the cold, suffocating panic of poverty. I shielded you from the harshness of the real world. But I see now that my protection was actually a disservice. Brittany wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve. I do not understand, she whispered. I made your life too easy. I continued, my voice carrying a profound, absolute honesty. I bought you designer clothes, I gave you expensive cars, and I paid for luxury vacations. I thought I was showing you love, but instead, I accidentally taught you that wealth is a given right and that respect is optional. That is exactly why a parasite like Travis was able to manipulate you so easily. He promised you a yacht and $2 million, and you were so blinded by entitlement that you gladly threw me away to get it. Brittany flinched, looking down at the carpet. Shame washed over her face, painting her cheeks a deep, humiliating red. I know, she choked out. I was so arrogant. I was so greedy. You were, I agreed, refusing to sugarcoat the truth. Love does not mean being a doormat, Brittany. A mother's love is unconditional, but access to her life and her wealth is a privilege. You shattered my trust on that country club stage. You cannot just apologize and expect the penthouse doors to magically swing open again. If I take you back today, you will never truly learn the value of loyalty, and you will certainly never learn the value of a dollar. I turned around and opened the top drawer of my desk. I did not pull out a heavy red legal folder this time. I reached inside and retrieved two very simple items. I walked back over to Brittany. I held out my right hand. Resting in my palm was a standard cheap brass key on a plain metal ring. It did not have a luxury logo. It did not belong to a $100,000 sports car. It was just a heavy, jagged piece of cut metal. I placed the key into Brittany's trembling hand. I then handed her a plain manila folder. Brittany looked down at the brass key, her brow furrowing in confusion. She slowly opened the manila folder. Inside was a printed document, but it was not a corporate trust fund agreement. It was a standard pre-filled job application for a barista position at a local coffee chain. What is this? Brittany asked, her voice small and fragile. That key belongs to a tiny 300-square-foot studio apartment on the south side of the city. I explained, my tone radiating pure, unyielding steel. It is located in a working-class, blue-collar neighborhood. The neighborhood is safe, but it is not a luxury high-rise. There is no doorman. There is no private parking garage. The apartment has a basic bed, a small kitchenette, and a clean bathroom. That is it. Brittany stared at the employment application in the folder. The coffee shop is exactly 4 blocks away from your new apartment, I continued. The manager is expecting you for an interview at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. You are going to put on a uniform. You are going to stand on your feet for 8 hours a day. You are going to serve coffee to people rushing to their actual jobs, and you are going to smile while you do it. You are going to earn a minimum wage paycheck, and you are going to use that money to buy your own groceries. Mom, Brittany whispered, fresh tears welling in her eyes. I do not know how to live on my own. I do not know how to pay utility bills. I do not even know how to ride the public transit bus. Then you are going to learn, I stated with absolute unwavering conviction. You stood on a stage in front of 100 people and demanded your independence. You claimed you were a fully grown adult who did not need my controlling rules. Well, true, independence is not bankrolled by your mother. It is earned through hard work. I reached out and gently tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear. The rent for that studio apartment is paid in full for exactly 3 months, I told her softly, letting a fraction of maternal warmth bleed into my voice. I also paid the water and the electricity deposits. You have a 90-day safety net to get your life together. After those 3 months are up, you are entirely on your own. You will pay your own rent, or you will face eviction just like anyone else in the real world. Brittany stood perfectly still in the center of my executive office. She looked at the brass key in her hand. She looked at the barista application in the folder. For a long, agonizing moment, the heavy silence stretched between us. I braced myself for another tantrum. I prepared myself for her to throw the keys on the floor, accuse me of being cruel, and storm out of the building. But she did not. The spoiled, entitled teenager who had been poisoned by Travis's greed was officially gone. The reality of her cold, terrifying night in that roadside motel had fundamentally changed her. She realized that I was not punishing her out of spite. I was giving her the exact tool she needed to rebuild her own character. Brittany closed the manila folder. She gripped the brass key tightly in her fist. She looked up at me, the tears continuing to fall, but the defiant arrogance was completely replaced by a profound, humbling understanding. "Okay," Brittany said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Okay, Mom. I understand." She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and accepted her new reality. She turned around and walked toward the heavy glass doors of my office. She did not ask for a ride. She did not ask for cash to buy breakfast. She simply pushed the doors open and walked out carrying nothing but a brass key, a job application, and the heavy weight of her own independence. 6 months passed, with the ruthless, unrelenting efficiency of a ticking clock. The dust finally settled over the spectacular ruins of my ex-husband's life, and the consequences of his boundless greed were absolute. Travis had tried to run. After abandoning his daughter on the wet sidewalk, he stole a cheap used truck from a former acquaintance and fled across state lines. He was desperately trying to outrun both the violent shadow lender from the South Loop and the massive legal crosshairs Kendra had meticulously painted on his back. He made it exactly as far as a dilapidated roach-infested motel in rural Texas before his past violently caught up with him. You can run from angry suburban neighbors and you can even try to hide from underground loan sharks, but you cannot outrun the federal government when there is a perfectly documented paper trail. Federal agents kicked his motel door down at dawn. Kendra had made absolutely sure the prosecuting attorneys possessed every single piece of evidence. They had the forged emails Travis used to secure the $150,000 yacht loan. They had the fraudulent bank applications. Most importantly, they had the unsealed court records, proving 18 years of severe deliberate child support evasion. Travis was charged with multiple federal financial crimes, including wire fraud and grand larceny. He stood in a cold courtroom, permanently stripped of his rented tailored suits, wearing a bright orange jumpsuit. The judge showed zero leniency. Travis was sentenced to 5 years in a federal penitentiary. The man who had mocked me, who had tried to extort my life's work and manipulate my child, was now locked inside an 8x10 concrete cell. He had absolutely nothing, and this time, there was no one left to manipulate into saving him. Vanessa had already filed for a completely uncontested divorce, entirely severing herself from his toxic, sinking ship. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, a completely different kind of transformation was taking place. On a brisk Tuesday morning, I sat in the back of my chauffeured black SUV parked discreetly across the street from a busy downtown coffee shop. Through the large glass windows, I watched my 18-year-old daughter working the brutal morning rush. Brittany was wearing a dark green uniform apron, heavily dusted with flour and espresso grounds. Her hair was pulled back into a messy, highly practical ponytail. She was moving frantically behind the counter, steaming milk, wiping down sticky surfaces, and handing out cardboard cups to impatient corporate commuters. For the first 90 days, she had struggled immensely. She had called my corporate office in tears, overwhelmed by the physical exhaustion of standing on her aching feet for 8 hours a day. She complained about the smell of roasted beans permanently clinging to her skin. But I held my boundary of steel. I did not return her calls. I did not send her a single dollar. When the 3-month safety net I provided officially expired, Brittany had to face the terrifying, uncompromising reality of paying her own rent. And she did. She picked up extra weekend shifts. She learned how to ride the public transit bus to save money. She learned how to budget for generic groceries instead of eating at country clubs. She stopped looking for a savior and finally started saving herself. I watched her hand a hot coffee to a demanding customer and offer a genuine, tired but incredibly proud smile. She was earning minimum wage, but the deep respect she was building for herself was completely priceless. She finally understood the sheer weight of a dollar. She was becoming a capable, independent adult, and looking at her through that glass window, I had never been more proud of her in my entire life. I tapped the partition, instructing my driver to pull away. I left her there to keep growing. That evening, the Chicago skyline sparkled like a sea of diamonds outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the most exclusive fine dining restaurant in the financial district. I sat at a private corner table draped in crisp white linen. Across from me sat Derek, looking sharp in a tailored navy suit, and Kendra, who was absolutely glowing in a stunning sapphire dress. A waiter in a crisp white jacket approached our table and poured an exceptionally rare vintage of champagne into our crystal flutes. We were not just celebrating the end of the darkest chapter of my family life. We were celebrating an absolute monumental corporate victory. Earlier that afternoon, JC Holdings had officially closed a massive, highly competitive acquisition deal. I had just purchased a 50-story commercial high-rise right in the heart of the city. My real estate empire had not just survived the pathetic smear campaign Travis tried to orchestrate. It had expanded exponentially, solidifying my position as one of the most formidable executives in the state. Derek raised his glass, the crystal catching the golden ambient light of the restaurant. To Jocelyn, Derek said, his voice filled with profound, unwavering respect. To the strongest woman I know, you protected your empire, you protected your family, and you took out the trash with absolute perfection. Kendra raised her glass to meet his, a sharp, brilliant smile lighting up her face. To flawless legal execution, Kendra added, her tone ringing with fierce predatory satisfaction, and to the absolute certainty that no man will ever dare underestimate you again. I raised my glass, meeting their eyes with a deep, profound sense of peace. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of the champagne. The taste of victory was sweet, crisp, and entirely earned. I looked out over the glittering city that I had conquered, reflecting on the brutal, necessary journey of the last 6 months. I had given my daughter the world, and she had used it to try and destroy me. But by stripping away her unearned luxury, I gave her something infinitely more valuable. I gave her resilience. A mother's love is unconditional, but access to her life is a privilege. Sometimes the most beautiful act of love is letting them hit rock bottom so they can learn how to climb. Have you ever had to enforce a brutal boundary with someone you love to help them grow? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about surviving betrayal and building your own empire. Thank you for watching, and remember, your wealth, your boundaries, and your peace of mind are always worth fighting for. The story teaches that setting firm boundaries requires profound emotional awareness. True love does not mean funding toxic behavior or allowing financial betrayal to destroy your inner peace. Jocelyn's journey demonstrates a powerful moral resolution. Rescuing someone from the consequences of their own greed only teaches them crippling entitlement. By forcing her daughter to face stark reality, she broke a deeply destructive cycle. Hardship builds authentic character far better than unearned luxury ever could. Sometimes, letting someone hit rock bottom is the only way to help them truly grow. Share this story with anyone needing courage and comment below with the hardest boundary you have ever established.